Hey folks, welcome to the pilot slash experiment of a new Battalion themed podcast called In the Trenches. I am Dustin, with me is LeX, Deily and Davy, Sysmans. And we have Lex basically representing North America, and we have Davy over there representing Europe, as they've both been competing in online tournaments for their respective regions. And so we just want to talk a little bit about Battalion. Before we go too much further, I want to give them a chance to kind of introduce themselves, because while I think most people will be familiar with these two faces, maybe not, you never know. So we'll start with Davy. Davy, could you maybe just give people kind of a rundown of your background a little bit before we get started?
Yeah, so I'm Davy Sysmans, as you said. I was a Call of Duty player, Call of Duty 1, 2, and 4, but most people will know me from Call of Duty 2, where I played for Tech 9. We won a bunch of stuff. Lex knows, he was there. When we won WSVG in Dallas. I also played CoD 4, also for Tech 9, and eventually I mixed with a team called Infused, and also played with Button Bashers. And then, well, that was it for my CoD 4 career, I guess. Mainly those three clans I played for.
There you go. And so Davy, of course, now is leading the...
Davy.
Yeah. So, of course, now he's leading the albino cats in a snowstorm, which I have affectionately called Assy Ass a million times on stream, because I just think it really rolls off the tongue. And, of course, a lot of other veterans are playing on that team, like Knoller and Toxia, Cordy, and Supreme. So you may have seen them around some Blitzkrieg battles and other tournaments. And then, Lex, of course, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
I am LeX Deily, and I've never really been good at anything, but I have played COD 1, 2, and 4. I remember meeting Davey for the first time in like 2007 or something like that, and he had no idea who I was then. So it's actually kind of cool that now that Battalion's rolling back around, I'm not only getting to see these guys again, but get to know them a little better too. So it's being the first time that we'll be on a podcast together, of course. Hopefully not the last. I just got done, I guess, a relatively kind of long period of CS:GO career. I don't know. I'm enjoying the hell out of Battalion, so I guess I'm a Battalion player now, Dust.
Yeah, indeed. He's playing with Pure now in Battalion, which is a team that has done pretty well in most of the tournaments they've played in. I know they've won a couple. I think they had like a little bit of an early exit, one of the more recent ones. Let's not talk about it, though, of course. He's playing with a couple of familiar names. I know Grego used to play in Overwatch for Cloud9. I know he's one of your teammates on this team for right now. Then a couple other guys like Foxrock Spurks and JC Stani, which I'm not sure what games they may have been. Were they affiliated with anything?
I have no idea.
I know you met them in Alpha,
they've all
right?
like played a little bit of COD and Overwatch, I think. Yeah, the whole team is just people that basically I met in the pub. I asked Grego like probably 2 alphas before closed beta release. I was just like, yo, we should make a team. You're good. And he actually hit me up on Steam like a week later.
You play for Cloud9. You should be good.
Yeah, Grego.
There you go. So the way I want to start this
did we actually chat in Dallas or what? Like, I'm sorry.
No, I think no, we've never like actually hung out or anything. In fact, I hung out with the Speedlink dudes, if anything, of the European teams. The entire was there. It was like Phi1 and Fustut and those guys.
Great.
They didn't speak much English, so my social skills at 16 were perfect to hang out with them.
And your German is good?
No, my German is not good. Their English was terrible. That's what I'm saying. That's why we got along, because I was like 16. I didn't know how to talk to people. No, but I mean, I remember sitting behind, well, I wasn't sitting behind you. I was sitting behind Prank, but, I remember, I mean, that whole finals was like, even though USA lost, it was like the most amazing COD 2. I mean, the semifinals run into the finals run, I think, for Pandemic was just highlight of my entire experience there. And maybe like of my gaming spectatorship to date. I mean, that was just so cool being there in person. So, I mean, absolutely, from that point forward, I was a Davy fan, even if you weren't from NA.
Thank you.
It's true.
Well, the North American teams tried. They tried.
God.
Dude, actually, no. Okay, so I'm just gonna get this on record now, because I've told this story several times over the year when people ask me like, Lex, like, how do you deal with playing on LAN, and like what's the hardest you've ever choked at a LAN and stuff like that? And I always tell the story, and it's not about Tech 9, it's about those guys I mentioned earlier, Speedlink. and it was like WSVG. We were the first NA team to actually play Europeans in COD 2, and so like we had a bunch of people like hyping us up for the first match and standing behind us and stuff. And like we were doing the coin toss with the Speedlink guys, and a couple of me and my teammates were just standing there like goofing off, being idiots, and we started singing the Star Spangled Banner, obviously because we were obnoxious and 16, and like we were messing up the words throughout like halfway through the song, and we like just kind of stopped and started walking away, and the Speedlink guys finished it for us. It was like the most humbling experience you could possibly have as a 16-year-old, your first like big LAN.
I can imagine them doing that.
It was funny.
That is good. But let's shift focus now a little bit to Battalion. So we're going to kind of speed through some of this first parts because right now we're obviously already a little bit into early access, and so that's where we kind of want to focus our conversation, I think. But I am just curious, you know, you guys obviously both being Call of Duty PC circuit veterans, when you guys first saw Battalion, you know, whether it be the Kickstarter or whether it was later on when you first started seeing some of the, like the original gameplay footage that was going around, you know, what were kind of your first impressions? And I guess we can start with Davy.
Well, first impressions.
Well, hold on real quick, though. Also, I have to add, I think, Davey, weren't you, like, fairly involved early on, like, helping them, like, with stuff? Because I know Fantasy obviously was and then eventually became an employee, but I think you were involved pretty early on as well, right? So maybe you can speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I played the first alpha, which was, now, was it in May or was it in the summer? I don't remember, but I was, like, involved in the first alpha already. Because the devs reached out to the cyber gamer forums, which like CoD 2 and CoD 4 were still active in Europe, and they were active on that side. And Bramerton, I think, posted on those forums about them remaking a CoD 2 style game, which eventually became more of a CoD 4 style game, but okay. But that was really exciting for me, and I actually reached out to Brammer, I think, just on a forum post that if they needed any help or whatever, I'll help. They know what they're doing, I guess. But I just wanted to be there early on because I'm really excited to see that kind of game get into esports. So yeah, early on I was there, and after my first impressions when playing alpha was just pretty much what I was expecting, you know. First thing I did was take the Car 98 out, and that feel was just good from the get-go. They really nailed it at the first thing. That's one of the best things they did in Battalion, I think, is the Car 98. It's really, really cool. So I was immediately like excited, even though it was just like an early version of Manor House TDM. But it was really promising for like an Alpha 0.1 or something, you know, like. It's really not bad. So I was excited.
So Lex, what about your first impressions when you saw some of the first footage and first gameplay? I
won't lie. I mean, my impressions of the early on version of the game, I mean, I was hopeful and I thought it was like a cool idea. But I remember actually loading up, it was probably, I don't know if it was 0.1, but it was like either the first or the second iteration of the alpha. And like he said, I mean, I hopped into a Manor TDM and ran around for 2 minutes, and like the game was so unfinished at the time. Like if you can imagine like CSGO, what it was like from 2012 and compare it to 2015, like that's just a level of how much they've added to the game since that early alpha era. And I remember at the time thinking like, you know, this is a cool concept. They really captured the feel of a couple of guns. And like, you know, the gameplay felt okay, but I was just like, this is so unfinished. I'll never see this in my lifetime. Like there's no way they'll be able to do this. And they actually pretty quickly made me eat my own words and my own kind of thoughts about it, because I think it was right after I got back I was at Gamescom in Germany, and the Battalion booth was there. And that was like the first build of the alpha. I think apparently that was like really good. It was the big one that they had done. I think they were doing it to debut Gamescom. I might have that completely wrong, but that was like around when I started playing the alpha again, and was amazed that there was like a bunch of people in NA playing from alpha to alpha, like trying to take it seriously. like teams were scrimming during the alpha and during the closed beta, and it was like, holy shit, like why am I not doing this? And I was still playing CS:GO at the time, so I like was always ever hopeful of Battalion, but until closed beta weekend, I wasn't totally sold that it was going to work. But definitely, I was interested in it and excited about it at points even. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was kind of the same way. Like, I noticed it because I was somewhat involved in CoD 4 Pro Mod in the NA scene only, and I did a couple of things for CyberRev, or EREV rather, that they did some stuff for Cal and Civo, just broadcasting, and so I was familiar with it, and even took a break from Counter-Strike Source for a while to play CoD 4 Pro Mod on some lower-end Cal teams like Open. I think maybe I played a little bit of main, but it was really late, and I wasn't at all ingrained in the community is the point. Like, I don't ever want to make some fake claim like I was some CoD vet. I was not. I just dabbled in it and thought it was a lot of fun, but really I was always focused on the Counter-Strike franchise as a commentator pretty early on, and I've carried through that in CSGO and to desk analysis stuff. But anyway, so I saw this Battalion game, and I didn't really care about the gameplay footage in the Kickstarter because I was just like, all right, whatever. But it was just the mission statements kind of caught my attention. It's like, oh, okay, like they're trying to bring back this old school shooter, perfect marriage of CoD 2 and CoD 4. I tried to do that, which obviously is going to appease some people and maybe tick off other people who want it more like CoD 2. Maybe we can talk about that in a second. But yeah, I think I backed it like in May of 2016 on Kickstarter with no actual contact with the devs or anything. It's just purely, yeah, sure, I'll throw $15 at this and see what happens. And then pretty quickly on, though, I got in touch with Howard and Brammer because they wanted to talk to me and Vince, who people will know from CoD 4 as Metis, and he went by Metis in CSGO for a long time as well, another commentator. And they came to us pretty early on because we were casting some DreamHack events together for CS, and they were like, hey, can you come talk to us about spec mode for Battalion, like what you guys would want? And so we had like an hour-long meeting with Howard on Skype, just about like a wish list for spec mode. And some of that stuff's already in the game. Obviously, the spec stuff's a long way to go, but certainly it's been kind of cool to be involved early on and play through some of the first alphas and stuff like that. Certainly, like to echo Lex, it's come a long way. Like, I mean, people won't probably appreciate that because they weren't involved in the original alphas, 6 to 8 months ago. But if you compare that to where we are now, movement is drastically different and well more refined. Guns handle a lot better. We actually have maps to play, and so the game's definitely come a long way. I think people won't really realize that. I think if they have only just come on during early access, they won't realize how much progress it's made. I think because we've seen that, maybe we're a little bit more optimistic about its future compared to some people who have only seen what they've seen in early access and have no past to kind of base projections off of. I saw what they did in 6 months to this game, so I'm maybe a little bit more hopeful than some might be. But anyway, to kind of kick it off, now we had closed beta, which was really only one weekend, but after the alpha. To kind of go off what I've been talking about, what did you guys think about the beta in comparison to like your first impressions? I guess we'll start with Davey again.
The closed beta. I was really excited for it because, well, I played all the alphas, I think, or not all, but like almost all. Mm-hmm. And closed beta was the first time. Well, closed. I mean, it could be streamed for the first time, right, during the closed beta.
Right.
I was really like excited for what the response was gonna be, and also knowing that Shroud was gonna stream it, and that's a lot of exposure right there. That was what got me most excited about the beta, because I already played the game, and like the closed beta wasn't a big difference with the last alpha, I believe. I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, roughly about the same. And early access is pretty similar to closed beta as well. So
yeah, so I was more excited about the fact that people are gonna finally see the game than the gameplay, because the gameplay was pretty much the same. But I think it was pretty well received. During the beta, people were getting excited, even though they couldn't play yet. But people could see potential in the game, I guess. And that was a good thing to have.
What about you, Lex?
Closed beta for me was like, I mean, that was when I probably had the most hope in the game, just because from within, like, okay, so in North America, at least, like the CoD 2 and CoD 4, and even players all the way back to CoD 1 all kind of keep in touch. And I mean, it's called the TZ on our Discord. It's like what is organized for pugs. But we've had our own kind of like Facebook groups and forums where we all just kind of keep in touch. Like I don't even know how many hundred there were, but we would always post random stuff when it had to do with gaming or life or whatever, or if like a member of the community passed or something, like we would always know about it just because even though like hardly any of those guys even played games anymore, if they were playing PUBG or Overwatch, that nobody plays games together like they did from the COD 4 community at least. And they had been pretty resistant to, I mean, I had like tried to actually promote the Kickstarter and stuff for the game because I just thought it was a cool idea. I got like a lot of backlash from old COD 2, COD 1, COD 4 pros. And I was like, holy shit, like people really don't want these games back because, I don't know, they just wanted it to remain a good memory, I guess, and didn't believe it could be done. They're all playing the game now, bless their hearts. But it was just like, I was really skeptical. I was like, if like these legends, these amazing people that like I looked up to my whole career, and they certainly enjoyed the game when they played it. I don't know why they wouldn't enjoy something similar now. That was my thoughts going into the closed beta. And then I saw like tons and tons of my CS friends all hit me up like, how do I get better? What can I do to get a key? Just people that had no business even being interested in this kind of a game, as far as I was concerned, were like ravenous to see where it was going to be. And I think those same people that maybe like played for 10 hours in the alpha, during the closed beta, I think those are like the kind of like the return customers that Battalion probably aims to win back later on down the line. And I think it left a good impression with a lot of those people. So, closed beta at that point was a very kind of optimistic look for me, I think.
Yeah, because again, I think, people won't realize how far this game came through alpha. Like I said, closed beta, early access, basically the same game. I think maybe the only differences is some balancing that they did with the STG and bar, and then apparently they had decreased horizontal jumping accuracy with the scope, or maybe even just across the board that was kind of minimal, so I don't think people really noticed that. But there's definitely been some balancing tweaks and obviously new maps being added in early access, but the core gameplay from closed beta is pretty much the same as far as how movement works, how the guns feel. I know they did, change some iron sights around a little bit to make things more visible, but for the most part,
the one taps that wasn't for a long time, and I kept whining about it. Even in Gamescom too, the LeX. I told the devs there personally that you want to have one taps in the game. That's so exciting to see. It's really skillful. Like in CoD 2, it was just awesome to have those one taps. Actually, in every game, I guess. Like CS, for example, it's a big game, and the one taps are just a big thing. Because if you don't have that in the game, then all you're gonna see is people spraying. That was in CoD 4. To me, CoD 4 was really boring to spectate because all it was spraying.
Same.
It was mouse one. Or the snipers. Snipers were like the most enjoyable thing. Stevie, guy, that was fucking awesome to watch that guy. I played with him, it was awesome to spectate that guy because sniping was really cool to see because of the bolt action, the one click. I'm so happy that they listened to the community and added the one taps eventually because that's really a big thing to have, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
I must say in CoD 2, one taps were really cool, but they were too random. Sometimes, but if you used hip fire, you could get a one tap across the map hip fire.
With a pistol.
That shouldn't happen. That was a bit. Well, I think it should be possible to happen, but not too much. In CoD 2, it happened a lot, so that was a really frustrating part of it. But if you tone that down a bit, and I think in Battalion now, it's pretty good. Except for I think the hitboxes should be a little bit bigger or something for the headshots. There's still something off there. But they're heading in the right direction, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now most people respect a lot of the core gameplay as far as how movement works, how the guns feel for the most part. I mean, obviously people have arguments about balancing, certain strengths and things like that. And we'll get to that in a second about balancing because I know that there's already some balancing changes on the way that have been made public, but I don't know if people really know about them yet. So maybe we can put like a little bit more of a spotlight on it. We've already seen it with the Barn STG, but I know SMG nerfs are coming, and I know that lean buffs are coming as well. So I know those are coming. So I guess that's also like one thing to add to a positive is that it feels like balancing changes happen pretty fast in this game, and they're very responsive in that. We don't have to wait months for a balance change. Like, it pretty quickly gets noticed and kind of experimented with right now in early access. Same with new maps seem to be coming in on a pretty... So content and balancing seem to be being tweaked pretty regularly, or additions being made pretty regularly, which is always good to see kind of an active early access process for that reason. But now we're going to get into early access because obviously this did not go as smoothly as maybe people had hoped. And just to give people a quick run through of what I'm talking about, you know, first day of early access was really rough because everyone wanted to play and matchmaking was just completely haywire. We should note that competitive wasn't out yet. It was just unranked play or arcade play, and it didn't work out really well. You know, part of it was apparently Brammer saying that they underestimated how many people would play. They based their numbers off of beta. They wound up getting like double or triple that amount of players on early access day. But then it came out later on when the whole competitive thing flubbed that apparently was some type of issue that Bulkhead were having with Google's cloud servers, that they pay Google for the cloud service or whatever for their servers, and apparently there was some issues with Google which caused them not to get servers up, and it was a big mess basically. So I guess from my feeling is, and I want to get your thoughts on this, but it really felt to me that unfortunately, because early access day one went so poorly, it got better really fast, to be fair. Like, unranked worked pretty well within the first couple of days, but that first day was really rough. And I feel like now it's caused this chain reaction where like the initial hype for the game from like a casual's perspective really died off because of this, which is really unfortunate because I think the core game is great. I know they're working really hard, but it felt like it kind of killed the initial hype, and now we're going to need something huge to bring it back. But what are your guys' take on this whole early access situation?
You want to go first, Davey?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Early access, yeah, I was surprised about one of the quotes of the devs. They said they didn't expect more players than in the closed beta, which was really weird.
Well, no, they based it off open beta, apparently. But go ahead.
Was there an open beta?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There was open beta for 2 days after the closed beta.
Yeah, I mean, come on, like, certainly you should expect more than that.
Yeah, your point still stands. Continue.
Yeah, I feel that's given. But personally, I got to play the game with a lot of people, and well, the thing is, I think I mainly scrimmed. I didn't use the servers they had.
Mm-hmm.
As I remember, I didn't really have too many issues or whatever. I do think that they should have. Well, they should have seen it coming. Like, all the people. What was it eventually? 16,000 or something?
Yeah. I think 16,000 is the peak.
3,000, 4,000? Like, I think you should expect more than that. I mean, especially if you got big streamers playing it beforehand.
Yeah, speaking of which, that backfires on you, doesn't it? Like, it's great exposure for your game, but when it's not working right and you have Shroud and Tim the Tap Man, these different guys trying to stream it with 5-figure viewer counts, and their business relies on their content. That's why you see them going back to PUBG, where they know it's going to work, they know the game's popular. It backfires, that whole game plan, has it not? I mean, now, like, no one's streaming it, unfortunately, except for, I think the biggest streamers are probably, like, LeX and Fantasy. And then when we do a tournament.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem at this point. I mean, the
probably
game
not. Yeah, you don't want it to get seen now. Like, you want to wait for it to get refined. And I think Brammer's been pretty open about that, by the way, that they're really kind of telling streamers to hold off.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people. Well, the community seems annoyed. Well, is annoyed, I guess, from some of the issues. But I think that's not. I think that's a bad way to look at it. I mean, the game is really fucking early, and you're part of a small community right now, so you're gonna hear all the negative things of that community. But it's gonna grow. There's gonna be a lot more content released. The developers have showed that they listen to the community, and that's one of the main reasons why I'm still hopeful for the game. They listen to the community, and they. I mean, they could use a PR manager or something. If you
we'll get to that in a second. That's a whole separate topic I have, actually.
But I come from playing Call of Duty. You know, in 6 or 7 years' time, I saw, 8 patches or something in that game?
Yeah.
That's what I saw since last May. And
patches.
You know? So they're involved with us, and that's the thing you gotta think about. Like they're listening, they're really listening.
All right, Lex.
We're talking about early access in general, right?
Let's just talk about like the first couple of days, and then we'll kind of go into where we're at.
Yeah, sure. We'll snowball into that. Okay, so like first couple of days were, I mean, in a lot of ways, it was just like one disaster after another. I mean, I really can't think of, I mean, other than the game just straight up not working, you can't really put blame on anything else than like that was a pretty, I mean, it looked bad. It looked bad. And unfortunately, like there is definitely like a stigma around the game right now. Like the amount of times that I've had people reach out and be like, wow, man, like, are you still trying to play that game that is completely broken and no one can play? It seems to be the attitude from an outsider's perspective. And it's just like, unfortunately, that's not going to go away anytime soon. But like, you know, all that means is we just got to do the same thing that we did, I don't know, in CoD 1, 2, and 4 and just figure it out by ourselves, except this time we have dev support and, you know, and I think above all else, like we have a really fun game on our hands. So I think in general, a lot of the attitude towards it is warranted for like the game having issues. But the other side of that is that like the generation of not, I don't even want to use like age or generation. I just mean like the era that we're in now. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people that look to like a competitive game specifically are people that have aspirations of going pro and they want to invest time in a game. They want to master something the same way that, you know, me and Davy tried to do when we were younger playing these games for the first time. And, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of money on the line when we first started, but you know, now it's not only a business for people that stream the game or make content or want to run a community website or host a tournament. Like all those things are well and good, but the average player that's going to go out and purchase your game, hop into a TDM, practice his skills, end up in an SD server, and then start playing on ladders and one day play at your major is going to look at that game and say, wow, I can't even rank up in competitive right now. Like, what the hell's the point of playing? There's no money. Like, of course, the player counts are going to be low. There's not going to be people. There's not really an incentive for the competitive player, and there's definitely not an incentive for a casual player right now. So it's like that launch being as disastrous as it was instantly turned those people from like, huh, let's go check out Battalion and see if it works to uninstalling and potentially never playing the game again, which I think is the tragedy of it. But but the game can be fixed. The issues will be worked on, and I don't. Whether or not it was a Google service issue or they just didn't plan well enough isn't really relevant to me. I hope they learned a lesson, and I think they've learned from it. You know, like a lot of what gets done in esports, especially when it comes to a business, and I'm not a game dev, so I don't know anything about this, but I think a lot of it is kind of trailblazing at this point because, you know, and a lot of it's random and luck if you're a game dev. If I had to imagine, I mean, you're talking about whether it's from investor standpoint to the community outlook of your game and how they feel about it and whether or not it's going to be popular are largely out of your hands. But there are things that you can do right, and they dropped the ball on day one. So whether or not it was their fault or not, I don't know. I just think as the game stood at the time, it was like Davey was saying, like I was scrimming the entire time. I was loving it.
Yeah, people were relying on private servers for the first couple of days. It felt like tech.
And no, so that's exactly what I'm saying is that a lot of what we're going to have to do kind of looks like early access the first few days, which is, you know, make it work for ourselves. And that just gives us time for the devs to kind of fix the issues that we're experiencing, whether it's on comp or ranked or ladder or whatever else is going on with the in-game client itself. Like the game itself plays great. I'm having a ton of fun. And sure, there's like fixes that need to be had, but I'm, you know, it was a shame, but I'm still super optimistic about it.
What I keep coming back around to is I feel like beta should have lasted longer. Like alpha lasted for months, and then beta was a weekend or like 3 or 4 days, and it just
felt it's like alpha weekend number.
Yeah, so that's basically what
it just didn't seem to have like a longer, like I feel like it needed a longer beta process. I feel like early access is just a glorified beta at this point, and maybe that's how it should be. I think it all comes down to like just how things are labeled and how you define certain words, because I feel like to me, early access feels like a glorified beta, and I think that's kind of what it should be. Like, you're getting early access to a game that's not fully released yet, so you should be kind of treating it like an open beta at that point. Exactly. But it does have a different term. It's not called an open beta, it's called early access. And I feel like what happens is people hear the words early access, and they feel, oh, I'm just getting early access to a full-fledged game. That's the way they interpret it. You know, because it's not labeled as an alpha or a beta. It's what we traditionally label games that are not at a completed state. But now we're using this word early access as a completed state because, for one, it allows developers to make money before the game's fully released to help the development of the game and then pay their employees and develop the game further before a full release or what have you. It's just like another means of investment, basically, but it's like crowdfunding, but in a different way because it's through whoever you're actually buying the game from as opposed to like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or whatever the case may be. And so I think of it, like I said, I think of it as a glorified closed beta, or open beta rather, when I hear the word early access. But I feel like a lot of people, when they hear the word early access, they think, oh, we're past the beta stage now, so this game should be basically ready to go. It should be a full-fledged game, and I'm just getting access to it earlier because I decided to pay into it early, or something like that. So I don't know if that plays into it or not, but I also keep coming around to the fact that I think that they should have left it labeled as a beta longer and really got stuff going before they did early access. But at the same time, I don't know what deadlines they were running on. I don't know if they were pressured to hit a certain date and they just fell behind, or I have no idea. We don't know what the internals are. But to me, it felt like it was way too rushed from that gap between beta and early access. And the fact that the game didn't change that much between beta and early access is also something that kind of felt a little weird. So I don't know, like, what do you guys think about that idea?
To be honest, like the last alpha weekends, I think the ones where we could play Search and Dispel Wartide felt good enough to have it open to a big audience. But the servers were working. You know, there wasn't a big audience lashing on the servers, so it worked. And if you get to play the game, then there's not a lot of problems. But a lot of people just didn't get to play the game and they paid for it, and that's probably the biggest frustration at that point. But what you said about you have to have a certain perspective on it, I guess. You have to look at it as a beta. I mean, I don't know where the early access business model comes from. It's probably not that bad, I guess, but I think in this case it should have been called just open beta, or you know, you can be involved for $15 in the open beta, whatever the fuck. If you call it like that, then I think people will look at it differently. Actually, just exactly as you said, like early access feels like you get the game early, but this is a game in development that you get. So
yeah,
that's different.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys pretty much covered all of it pretty well, and that's something that I was wondering too. Was just like closed beta weekend was one weekend. Like, what did we beta test, and what kind of info did you guys get? Because early access dropped like what? How many days later? It was quick.
The next weekend, basically.
I don't think they
actually
even had,
not even
like,
the next weekend. I think it released like 4 days later. Because it released on like a Thursday or something like that, I think.
1st of February.
Yeah,
I remember.
1st of February. Yeah, I was very confused because for early access, it seemed like even they were hyping it up to be like almost like you're gonna play this game early, like it's almost done, you know, let's get in here and start selling some games. I don't know if it was to that extent, but that's how I felt about it, was that people were getting really excited for this game, whether or not that was Bulkhead. I'm just saying, like, that was the community's perspective, was just like, this game is, we're gonna check this out. I had people coming up, I had like 300 viewers piling in my stream when I first started streaming the game, and it was just like people were excited for it. And unfortunately, at some point you got to wonder, like, if that weekend had gone even slightly better, like what could the difference have been?
The initial hype would be way at a higher level. Like that's what I'm saying. I feel like this killed the initial hype. You know, like I think if it would have, maybe you give them a couple of more weeks to get unranked working properly, and then you release early access. I think this goes like way differently. I think the other thing is that the fact that the core game itself works great. Like, obviously there's bugs and there's little issues, but when you're actually playing the game, it feels great, and like, I don't really have many problems. Again, there are some bugs that need to be fixed. Like, the one that's most glaring is probably the one where you can see someone's head pop up, like, in a flicker when they're crouched behind something. Like, little things like that are still certainly a problem. But the core game itself is hella fun to play for me and hella fun to watch. The problem is everything other than that, like the menu process, the queuing process. Like, those are the problems. Like, the game itself is fun and great. So that's what's even worse about it, is that the hard part seems to be accomplished. It's like the infrastructure part is the part that needs to be propped up a little bit better. And I think the other big problem is, and we're going to kind of move into this topic now, is that you basically just had the same thing happen when they released competitive. Like,
Yep.
Like, the same thing has happened again.
Almost identical, yeah.
It's the identical situation.
Almost identical.
It is. Like, you can't... I've only been able to play 2 placement games so far in competitive. Granted, I give up a little bit earlier than probably I should. You know, I'll queue... Like, I usually queue with a friend, and I try queuing for like 5 to 10 minutes. If it doesn't work in 10 minutes, and I just go play on rank, because I get that pretty quickly. But yeah, so it's basically the same thing. You know, even now, I think competitive's hard to do. In NA, at least. I'm not sure about the European perspective.
I think in Europe it's not that bad, to be honest. I never had problems with getting ranked games. I see people complaining about it, but I'm like, I don't have those problems. So
yeah, they're probably from other regions. Like in NA, I think I queued 2 or 3 times yesterday for extended periods. I didn't get a game, and it was like, you know, all I want to do, you know, from a content creator standpoint, not as a player, I was just like, all I want to do is stream this game, and like, unfortunately, it's tough to do for like, unless you're scrimming for 5+ hours.
Yeah.
Because I think like you said, the gameplay itself is something of beauty, at least to a guy like me who, you know, I love the movement aspects, and I love the World War II themed weapons and fucking gunplay, and it's just, it's one of those things where I want everyone to feel what I'm feeling when I'm playing that shit, and it's like, you can't always have that because, you know, servers are bugged, or you can't queue for whatever, and that's what sucks, is that feeling where it's like, I can't share that with other people.
I remember right now, actually, that we did have like an hour or whatever, or hour and a half, where we just got banned 15 minutes every time, and we just started to join.
Yeah.
I think mine was 8 times in a row or something like that.
It was really frustrating. And my teammate Stoksha actually wanted to stream, and he started up his stream, he booted the game, he got 5 people to play with him, and then he got banned, and then there's like an empty stream for 15 minutes because he's not like an entertainer or whatever. He just, you know, wants to stream. So it's a hard 15 minutes to fill.
And I mean, we're talking about me here, who's like, I'm not a huge streamer, but imagine like the Shrouds or whoever else might be playing this game that would have to basically, I know that Bramertron's now has said like, hey guys, like maybe you just don't stream the game for a little bit. I think he's been pretty open about it, like we mentioned earlier, but imagine being those streamers and actually having been there on the early access launch and trying to load up the game. Like I know Summit, I know too many people that did, and basically reached that point there. They immediately wrote it off, and it's like, okay, how many tens of thousands of people just saw all those streamers just shit on the game openly? It's like, yeah.
The scary part is I feel like the only guy who might come back is Shroud, because I know he just loves the game before anyone even contacted him, and I think he would come back and stream it in the future if it gets to a level where he feels comfortable being able to stream it and not have issues. But yeah, I think you're right. It may have scared off a lot of other people.
A guy like Shroud who wants to use his aim, which he is really talented in, then he's gonna come back, I guess, when the game is polished. But like,
that's how I feel.
I don't really follow the guys, but like Lyric and Summit, aren't they more like they stream anything?
Well, Summit's pretty heavily ingrained in Fortnite now. I think they kind of adapt as they feel needed to grow their communities or like kind of freshen up. I think a lot of people have like a main game that they play the bulk of their stream, and then they kind of like add in like a random day where they stream something else, or they'll like switch to a different game the last couple of hours and like experiment with a new game. And then I think it's also kind of based on what's getting released and like what has hype around it. Like when people were playing that, what was it, like Hunt the Showdown or whatever the heck that one game was?
Awful.
Or that pirate game, whatever that pirate game was.
Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves.
Loved it.
So I think they dabble in it like that, but they usually have like a main game. Like I would say Shroud's main game is PUBG, and like Summit's main game is Fortnite. At least right now, as this comes out, whatever the publish date is, could change.
I mean, they're all gamers, right? So, I mean, Shroud and Summit, both of which have been like friends of mine. Summit's an old teammate. Like those guys are all they want to do is frag, and if you can't queue the game, they're not going to want to play it. And they're certainly, as businessmen, they're not going to be playing a game where their viewers are going to hate watching it because they're sitting in a queue lobby for 45 minutes. I think that's like well-tread territory as far as what we're talking about now. I think it's more that like as the game's gonna grow and these guys take notice of what's going on, like I have a lot of people that just tune into my stream for an hour or more and watch me, message me privately afterwards. He's just like, dude, games looks a lot of fun. You know, hope it turns out well for you, and I hope the game grows. And it's just like that sentiment that I'm getting from other streamers playing the game, or that aren't playing the game, or maybe have never even played it, or even seen the game being played. It's like, yeah, I'm not streaming the game every day, but the exposure's there. People are still aware of it. It's just a matter of like,
it needs like another big
to what
spark.
effect? Yeah, to what effect can we inspire those people in a short-term fashion how to come back? And it, you know, it may be months from now, but a big update, announcement of some leagues, and maybe another LAN, and I think you'll have.
Yeah.
I think your player count and your viewer count as far as streamers. I don't even know how we got into this topic, Dust, but I think it's going to be solved.
That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of the
podcast, man.
Like the early access was like a first marketing push. No, actually the closed beta with the streamers. But I think they're gonna focus on another big marketing push, like in the summer or whatever, when the game is a lot more polished.
Yeah.
And because like relatively, maybe not a lot of people are actually aware of the game yet. But if by then they got budget to, you know, get some big streamers heavily involved, and a league and a tournament and all that, and you know, all the marketing, all the exposure, that's gonna get another like wave of players most likely. And at that point, you know, the game has to be solid and stable. That's the main part, and that's what they probably have learned right now. But I think that's gonna be really good for Battalion, like the another marketing push, a right one, and you know, $1 million tournament, I wouldn't mind. Goddamn Quake, man! Those guys got something. Like, let the old school CoD players have something as well. Let the circle come around.
Yeah, but I guess the point is like if you throw a shit ton of money at one big tournament, like you just destroy your budget for that one event, and like do you really gain anything from it? Like you get initial like look, like no one even talks about Quake Champions anymore, dog. Like yeah, they had that one tournament, but what happened after that? Like to be fair, they were at a few DreamHack Open events that did pretty well, like decent prize pool, decent viewership, but dude, like I haven't heard much about it at all lately. So maybe that isn't the right approach, is to go out with a bang like that. I don't know what the right approach is.
Yeah, I was just really egoistic about that point because I want to be competing for that top spot, you know.
No, I understand.
So I'll have an easy 200K. I don't mind.
Yeah, I feel like the goal is to have like bigger cash tournaments maybe next year. Is what I understand. Like I think they want to do like majors and things like that in the future. So eventually that prize money will be there, but just not here at the start in early access. It seems like.
I mean, aside from a big marketing push, though, I actually posted about this on Reddit a bunch last night. I was just like, had too many beers and was chilling and got way too into reading about Battalion. And I was just like, dude, the only like. If in the competitive player, at least here in NA, right? Because a lot of people are just sitting on the fence. Like I could go through my Steam list or down the TZ list of all the pros that I know that just like, or XCOD 2 and COD 4 pros that I know that enjoy the game, but just, you know, aren't going to put in any hours at all anytime soon until like leagues start getting announced and some actual competition gets started. And I don't even think you like if the short term kind of like player counts what's needed, like then you just, you know, have some tournaments hosted by ESL, and I think things will turn around. It doesn't have to be 200K, but you know, like a 10K online 6-week league or something like that right now over the summer being announced even would just be huge for just the perception from the player standpoint of like having something to play for, because
it's coming soon, I'm pretty sure, by the way. Lex,
the rumors, right, I know. I'm saying the rumors for LAN announcements, the rumors for league announcements are like right around the corner, right? So I think like having the game stable by those points where like your player counts are going to rise naturally either way. I think they want to time it so that, you know, when the game actually starts growing again. And yes, please. Thank you. You're the best and I love you. I think as soon as, oh my God, why?
What?
It's gonna be an H1Z1 water bottle. Oh my God.
God.
That's like the worst omen you could have ever given me in the middle of a podcast about an early access game. I'm still gonna drink from it.
I just text my girlfriend to bring me another beer, but she's not doing it. Yours is. What the fuck is this?
Dude,
poor guy.
We're gonna sit here long enough. You're gonna need another one after that too. Tell her to bring you two. No, I'm just saying, you know, all those thoughts pulled together, I think, you know, all those things kind of coming together as far as competition, like maybe catering a little bit to the casuals and a league announcement and a LAN announcement. And, you know, the player counts are going to rise. I just think having the game stable, like you were saying, Dust, is like the most critical thing on the devs' minds right now, or they should be anyway.
Like, priority number one should be getting the matchmake queues, like, reasonable. Like, to where I can actually queue competitive and play, and making sure that that part's stable. I think that's, like, priority number one. Then priority two is you know, everything else, basically. But that's number one. Like, let's just get the matchmaking queue working up pretty well. And I think we've kind of hit on all that already a lot. And so I kind of want to shift the focus more to, like, the gameplay itself and, like, where we think the game is at, like, maybe balancing and map-wise, like, weapon balancing and map-wise right now. Because I think this is where the game has already kind of proven that they're willing to make regular adjustments on a pretty consistent basis. Like, think about it now. Like, since the game came out early access, it's, been a few weeks out now. We've already had the STG and bar buffed. We've already had the horizontal jumping accuracy nerfed. We've already had word that SMG's nerfing is on the way. We've already had word that lean buffing is on the way. We've already seen iron sights change for better visibility. So we've already seen, for me at least, like, that's what makes me optimistic about the game, is that things like this are going really well for me. We have a new map announced that should be coming out in the next, like, month or so, to add to the competitive pool of 4 that we already have. So now we'll have 5. To me, like, this is where you start to get a little bit of hope for the game. Like, yeah, we talked about how some of the logistical and operational stuff faltered, like, first day of early access, first day of competitive, and that they are showing to try to be working to fix that. And they've been very open and transparent about it as well, which is another thing we can talk about the opensea and transparency. But from a balancing standpoint, I feel like the fact we're getting pretty consistent updating and exchange of feedback and response to feedback, I think that that's, like, one of the bright points of Battalion so far. So I'm kind of curious what you guys think about how weapon balancing has gone so far and where it's currently at, and then maybe we can talk about some things we'd like to see change. But I'll start with Davey.
Weapon balancing. Well, SMGs are just the most annoying part. Up close, they're like 2 or 3 hits to die, and in a fast-paced game like this with maps with narrow alleyways, a lot of narrow alleyways, you know, that makes it even more stronger. And what is actually the biggest issue when it comes to this is, like, the peeker's advantage thing. That is just insanely annoying, especially for a player like me. The game I loved the most was just CoD 2, which is about leaning, jiggle peeking, you know, going for that headshot, whatever, and not jumping around the corner and just hitting mouse 1 and having a certain sure kill. That's the thing that annoys me the most, and I've seen a lot of players, a lot of people complaining about that as well. Just the whole jumping around corners meta thing, it really needs to be adjusted. But I've seen, you said it as well, there are SMG nerfs incoming, so I hope they do it the right way, I suppose. I'm not a dev. I'm not gonna be saying you gotta do it that way or that way. That's up to them. But it needs to be fixed, because it's just not enjoyable a lot of times. Like, the game is, if you're in a situation, let's say a clutch, whatever, doesn't matter actually. If you know there's gonna be a guy coming around that corner and you're aiming at it, you know, you're leaning around the corner, you're aiming at it because you know you're smart enough to know he's gonna come there. You'll still have the advantage when he just jumps around and he just sprays. That's just
gotta jump first, Davey. You gotta jump first, bro.
I know he's gonna come into me. I'm not gonna jump first. That's stupid. So, like, I mean, it's so annoying. But that's the biggest issue. But furthermore, I think the sniper is really cool. Except I think for every gun, if you jump like strafe jump, if you jump standing up, right? If you're stationary, you jump
straight
up,
vertical jump.
Then the accuracy should be 100%. That's fine. Like CoD 2, that was really good.
Yep.
Or CoD 3 even again. But not when you're jumping around stuff. I think it should be less accurate as it is.
Yeah, I know they already nerfed it once, but it felt like it didn't really do a drastic difference.
No, it doesn't.
I don't know.
No.
I mean, to be fair, there was a video that came out from Fantasy who compared it to horizontal jumping accuracy with the scope in CoD 4 Pro mod.
And then there was someone that reacted with a video of CoD 4 on that, and he still did the things that were the problem in Battalion. So I don't know how that really worked, but like there was no change. Like in CoD 2, there was a thing called reload shot. I don't know if you guys know about that. You Lex probably know. Like if you reload it and there was a certain
animation glitch, basically.
Yeah, and you had to have the right timing. Then you could always 100% hit the shot. Well, the accuracy was 100% when you strafe jumped around. In Battalion, it's always 100%. Well, maybe not now, they say, but to me, it's
95%, 90%.
Yeah, like in CoD 2, if you did that, that was actually pretty skilled. But I think it needs to go.
Okay, so really quickly, Davey. Hold on, really quickly, Davey.
Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say really quickly, Davey. Like, have you been happy with the other stuff though in general? Like, I know we talked about like SMG nerfing and jumping accuracy nerfing, but have you been pretty happy with like the buffs to the STG and bar? I'm trying to add some positivity here, boys. You know, like we definitely should critique
the second half of the podcast is going to be the positive side.
Okay. But
I
Davey,
knew that from the get-go.
Have you been pretty happy with the other stuff though, outside of what you've mentioned?
Oh yeah, I mean, like MP44 to me, it feels great at this point. I love it. The bar is a bit underwhelming to me. I think it's a bit underpowered. I don't know if you agree, but it often feels useless to play with.
It's like the one thing it had over the STG was the one tap, but now the STG can one tap too. So now what does the bar like do against the STG? Like that's like the one thing that I feel is maybe something. But so that's kind of like my agreement with you about the bar, I guess. But in general, we get some positive sentiment. So now Lex, go ahead. Or are you gonna say?
What I was gonna say is, it wasn't actually a jumping accuracy nerf, right? It was while you're moving laterally while in midair, if you weren't fully ADS'd, your accuracy was nerfed, right? Because before, I remember, I still have clips on my stream from the alphas and the closed beta, or whenever they changed it, I don't remember. And it was just like I was flying around everywhere, just junk peeking everything and quick scoping, and it was like fully accurate, just murdering people, and I can't do that anymore. So I'm pretty sure
it was some kind of nerf, but it was minuscule.
But it wasn't jumping accuracy. It had to do with ADS accuracy, I think.
Okay. I'm not sure.
So if you're like 3/4 into your scope, you know, it's still not like totally random. It's not like your shot's not going to hit. It still has a pretty good chance of hitting, but it's not like dead on as it was. Like I still hit some pretty cool quick scopes, but it's like it feels consistent. I feel like, I don't know. I actually disagree with Davey on a lot of points. I think a lot of the issues, and my opinion on this has changed a bunch. I went from hating the jumping meta to liking it to an extent, and then now I kind of realize that after, you know, people have started to gather evidence on Reddit, it's that combined with the super fast time to kill in this game, peeker's advantage, and how fast the movement is, it means players are essentially like able to get the jump on you, have you on their screens for almost an entire like half second, get 3 or 4 rounds off on you before you even have a chance to react. And that's like, you know, maybe some of those videos were exaggerated and they weren't, you know, properly tested, but that's what I experience in my games when I have weird pings or we're on a server we're not too familiar with. Is like, there are times when, you know, sometimes somebody's jumping around a corner and you just feel like you got melted, like you had no time to react at all. And it was just like, wow, this is broken.
It's fine to me.
So is it kind of like a multiplier then? Like it's like stacked.
Well, I think
like it's like the jumping accuracy and then the peeker's advantage and then time to kill. Yeah.
I think it's something that's already strong inherently, right? Jumping around a corner is going to be strong, and you know, if you're fully accurate, no matter what. But if you combine that with something that like melts you in 2 seconds before you have time to react, what could be, you know, punishing this player with a Car 98 close range with a nice shot, like that's what a skill-based game is, right? Is being able to punish this with like, you know, an opportunity to react, to display good aim and good positioning, and actually punish people that take those kind of gambles. You can't do that very well in this game unless you have like a perfect connection. So I think once they've already identified the issues allegedly, so I think that part of it's getting worked on. And like you said, I think the SMGs especially is when you see it the most, because it feels like you're instantly dead afterwards. So I'm not totally sold that movement or anything. I don't like the idea at all of more randomness in an FPS like this. I remember, like, just like you had mentioned earlier, the CoD 2 clips. People would just make compilations of people running across the map with pistols, one taps on Dawnville and two Jane, just Webley snipes from A roof to East roofs, just tapping people that were tagged or whatever. And I don't think it was always a one-shot headshot in those games for things like pistols. I think that it was nerfed in CoD 2 kind of early on. But, like, I enjoy the idea of, being able to finesse someone with good movement and being able to punish them in unique ways that maybe I'm not used to in an FPS since I'm just coming from CS. So I felt like I was very much more open-minded than I normally should have been. I think I just want the devs to see their vision through to an extent before we go hardcore into trying to balance the game for them as a community. Because, like, even in the last week in NA, Dust, I was talking to you about it the other day. It's just like the game has changed so much, just based on speed, pacing, how people are thinking about the game. And I don't even think we've seen its final form yet as far as how it can be done competitively. So I don't know. I'm open to leaving the movement system how it is. For now, at least.
I feel like I'm in the middle of you two. Like, I feel like I don't want to kill movement, but I would like to see, like, a gray area we can play in where, like, someone holding an angle still feels like they're doing the right thing and can gain something from it, but not completely kill the jumping out either. Like, I don't know if there's, like, a fine line we can dance on in between or something like that.
I forgot to mention that part of the reason I think jumping is so strong right now is it's I think it was either David or you, but I don't remember. Somebody had just said something to the effect of holding an angle is really tough when you have somebody jumping on you in, like, a tight alleyway or something like that.
That's David.
And I think a lot of that was kind of stems back to, like, the way that you would peak angles in every single COD up until this one was you would be leaning as you were going around and jiggle peeking and being able to, you could even slow peek things and be relatively safe to a point and kind of even have peeker's advantage work for you. And now that leaning has been heavily nerfed, it's like you almost have to just give up your position when you have someone close on you, just because you know that jump is going to come and you have to set up for it, which in and of itself I feel like is tactical and it is skillful in a way to just have that presence of mind to understand what's about to happen to you and how to prepare for it. But, like, I don't think the jury should be out on all of this stuff forever, but I think once they actually do nerf that, or not nerf, but reduce the peeker's advantage as much as they can and kind of see how the netcode feels once they've actually done that, you can kind of better assess whether or not it's actually as broken as it feels right now.
I think the step should be first look at the peeker's advantage. If you can get that fixed, I don't know if that's possible technically, if that's just internet or whatever, but it's worse than it was in other games. That's what I feel like. If they can tackle that first, then I'd say don't change the movement or, like, the accuracy yet. Just let's see how the game plays when that's better. Maybe higher tick rate service. That's just a gamble. Again, I don't know technically how it works. But I'd like to test it out like that first. So, peeker's advantage, as minimal as possible. If then the movement or the jumping around corners is still as strong as it is, then it should get nerfed. But start with one step and then check the other and, like, pick a point. And
I mean, think about it though. If Bulkhead tomorrow released an update that got rid of all mid-air accuracy moving laterally whatsoever, you would have all the player base immediately having, like, calling for rebalancing of weapons for allies, like how to get in the faces of Kar 98s now and scopes and things like that. And you basically force people to have perfect utility usage in pubs and stuff like that to counter more stationary targets that you can't move on as well. I just think there's a lot of factors that, if you move with a core or mess with a core mechanic like sprint or movement or jumping, things of that nature, when the game is this early, like, it's going to cause a lot of other issues for just the enjoyability of the game. But I don't know. That aside, I think, I'm open to a lot of things that we can, in the future, see what happens with the game.
So we basically talked SMGs, lean, jumping around corners, like horizontal, lateral accuracy. Is there any other glaring things you feel like in the balancing of weapons, movement, whatever the case may be, that we should address now? Go ahead.
Nades. And I don't mean like nade radius or whatever. Maybe that needs a nerf. I don't know. But in the last couple of days, I think NA has reached its final form with finding nades. I know even in the alpha, I was kind of like, or no, it wasn't the alpha. It was the closed beta. We would like hop in random servers and just try and mess around with anything from nades and timings and the card system. And we watched all the European matches from the first Blitzkrieg, and we would watch the European streams and we'd see what they were doing. And it hadn't really completely caught on yet. It didn't seem like. But from my experience in the last week, it's like, I know the economy system's getting a complete rework.
Yep.
But one of the most glaring things about how the game could change in the near future competitively in the next few months is that economy system and how it affects nade uses. Right now with cards, it's like, it feels totally random with like how you should be working with your nades and your smokes, and that would have like left me something to be desired, I think, as far as strategy goes, because every round you're facing layer after layer of nades, and then there's some games where you feel like you have none and you're just forced into default classes. So I think the economy system is probably the next. I mean, it's not a balance change, but it certainly is going to change the balance of how nades are used.
Yeah, I'm cautious to even talk about it because I don't know what they're doing yet. I know that it's supposed to be physical currency that you can still pick up in game and you can earn through different things. But until I see it, I don't want to comment on too much.
Yeah, I don't think we can touch
episode 2 when it comes out. Maybe of this podcast would be great. But I didn't mean to
get that hardcore into it. Yeah, I just mean like.
I'm the guy that's playing default all the time for the rest of the team right now. So
yeah,
we can get my hands on the car or the MP44 a bit more. That would be just so awesome.
That's Grego on our squad, and it's like. It's one of those things where, honestly, I see the way that we know that we can play maps right now is essentially I can nade the other bomb site from my bomb site at any given point in time if I've got a nade on me. And it's like, I remember the days of CoD 2 Burgundy when, like, you would brave nades and everything in between to get into the B bomb site as allies, and then you would just fake the bomb 5 times because we were waiting for the set nades to come in. And it's just like, I don't know how spectator friendly that kind of a game is that's slowed down to the point where you have to wait for every nade to be expended. That's like I'm just saying it's a big question mark for me as far as how the game can be played, because if you nerf nades or make them less available, you have a faster game, you see more rushes, and the game kind of gets a little cheesy almost a little bit. But it's a faster gameplay, and if you allow more nades and allow players to just buy them every round, you're going to have a very slow game. So I think that's like something that is a big question mark in my mind from a competitive player standpoint. But as far as gun balance goes, I don't have anything else on that topic.
Burgundy was all like Burgundy first 25 seconds. If you would spectate, you'd spectate allies. It was just this.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is it raining? So you gotta go
look into the sky.
Yeah.
So, Davey, did you want to add anything? Like, you're the one who brought up like SMG nerfing and stuff like that. But was there anything else glaring out there that hasn't been mentioned yet that you think that you kind of want to see tweaked or you think needs improvement?
Well, I want to say time to kill, but that's mainly the SMG, I believe. So that's kind of the same point. What else? I mean, there's other things like smokes are retarded at this point that they know, and they will fix it.
I know. My question for you, Davey, actually is how do you feel about shotguns?
Oh, they're not good, I feel.
Bro, the worst is when people smoke the stairs at like A on Coastal. Like, who the heck does that? Saint 6 was doing that and stuff. Like, oh, that's been rough to watch. But yeah, let's talk about
competitive easy ban. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and hit shotguns in general. Yeah.
I think shotguns are random up close, or so feel random up close, and then sometimes they just hit across the map, or across the alley, whatever. I feel that they should be more focused on short range, I guess, by opening up the spread of the shotgun, and make it not possible to hit someone that's like 20 meters away from you, or hit or like kill, and sometimes not hit someone within your face. I think there's there's work to be done on the shotgun. But I saw Brammer tweeting that or posting on Reddit that it's in the state they wanted. But I've seen them say that about other stuff as well, and they did change it afterwards because the community said so. Well, asked so.
Right.
I think I do believe that there's going to be changes to the shotgun. Actually.
Yeah, the biggest example of that is the fact that they're willing to scrap Wartide as it is. Like, they were really adamant about that being their baby, and now, like, because of feedback, they've been willing to they're not completely killing it. I mean, you'll still have your classes or what have you and stuff, but I think that's just evidence that they're willing to budge even off of their most precious pieces of the game if the feedback steers them in that direction. I think that's a positive. So just to kind of give an example of that.
I think it was a brave thing to do, though, to add the card system. I mean, it's smart to want to be, they say, and it's great that they're doing like a Call of Duty remake, whatever, or combining a lot of games, but they want to have their unique thing to it as well, and that's what needed. I think it's a good call, and I think it's a really hard call, and it's hard to do, and it's a good, like, the card system was a good first try, and I guess I'm excited about the currency thing. I actually have no idea yet how it's gonna work, but it's good that they had a first try, and then they got experience in it, and they're gonna work on improving it now, and so it should just only get better, right? And I think it's good that it's not just search and destroy anymore.
Yeah, on all points, agreed. I think the card system had a lot of promise. I really like it to an extent. I don't understand the nade cards or anything like that, as I mentioned earlier, but I will say that they had a plan in mind for the card system, and it didn't pan out, I think, the way with as much depth as think they thought it was. Because we were able to come up, I mean, I don't think what we were doing was original. We stole it from the Europeans, of course. We do with everything.
Yes.
It's just like we were able to kind of game the system a little bit. Like the first few tournaments that we played, we were like messing around with our own economy and intentionally not picking any cards. I remember we didn't run a Garand, I think, for the first like 2 weeks of the game. Like there's just like little nuances that were cool, but also you could exploit some things and just throw the enemy team onto defaults by round 4, and it's just like, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. So I'm excited for the currency balance as well, and I don't know anything either, so it is what it is. I'm excited to go through those growing pains with Bulkhead hand in hand.
There you go. All right, so let's talk maps, highlights, and lowlights now. We've talked about weapon balancing, a couple other things, but maps are obviously a big part of the game as well, especially since we're still waiting for the economy thing to change. So I think maps is naturally the next thing to talk about. So highlights, lowlights, take it away.
Can I go first?
Yep, you can.
Because I feel like Davy's going to disagree with me on a lot, and he's going to have good input on changes, and I'm going to be...
He agrees he will disagree with you, but he also says he will have no good advice. So this will be brilliant.
Right, exactly. That's pretty much it. No, I actually was probably one of the most critical guys, at least on my team anyway, as far as the maps goes. Maps were during the alpha and then closed beta. I think they only had like one map in the closed beta, right? It's like
they had Coastal
Liberation
and Derailed were in closed
Derailed, yeah.
They didn't really have Manor House.
They didn't have Liber Manor.
They didn't have Liberation.
Yeah.
Well, they had Liberation in arcade mode, but it wasn't a competitive.
Well, they had the maps like one day for Wartide, I think, in the alpha, and that was like the one time that I had played them. I actually like was really critical of all of them, every single one except for maybe Coastal. I liked typical, but the issue that I have with the maps and why I am willing to forgive it is that there's no obvious way to play them just straight out the gate, just because no one's played it, right? So you kind of have to invent your own meta. You have to make up your own strats, and you got to figure out like what's the best way to do it. I feel like I'm pretty well studied as far as what games have been played thus far and like what I've seen. And it's hard for me to judge because obviously I don't play any U, but at least here in NA, like everyone was really not comfortable, it seemed like, on Manor House, Derailed especially. Like the maps that really required you to have like a team game plan, some set smokes maybe, and just an overall kind of strategy. It was newly tread territory, obviously, because it's a brand new game, and I don't think a lot of people had a lot of patience for them. That said, my opinion on the maps now is that, like, I think there's a lot of awesome fixes and general adjustments that can be made on every single one of them, from just like messing around with the size of the maps to, you know, reducing some of the travel times between bomb sites. There's tons of stuff that you can do to kind of just modify and improve both the casual and the competitive feel on the maps. But I will say that the general concepts of the way the maps are laid out, while I wasn't a fan of them at first, I think in a competitive environment, I actually really love the maps. And there's not one that I really, really, really just think is broken at this point. In fact, like, one of our favorite maps to play is Manor House, which, like, I've never met anybody else that likes Manor House. So that's what I mean. It's just like, my opinion is definitely going to be different from the average player, and certainly, well, maybe even Davies. But yeah, I think
you're calling me an average player right there, but
no.
let's just breeze past that. Let's just breeze past that.
No. I'm just saying, like, I think the devs weren't as far off the mark with some of these map designs as I originally, maybe publicly or on my stream, gave them credit for, because I think, just, you know, as simple as it is as it is in, oh my gosh, it's too early, man. I can't even speak. I think as maybe
really, what are you talking?
As easy as it is in, like, CS:GO now, because, you know, that's the easiest thing for me to relate it to at this point. Like, every single player in a pub knows how to smoke Meta Mirage. You know, it's just like a regular thing where you can't really play the map unless you have that smoke up at the beginning of the round, and it's really not hard for you to just ask a random player to do that for you. And in pubs, it's especially frustrating because a lot of these maps require you to have at least one smoke in one position and just be able to run around the map and do whatever you want and have fun. So I'm a little split on whether or not that's a good thing. I think for competitive it can be, but I mean, I feel like a lot of times in pubs, I feel like I'm cheating by using the scope just because I know exactly what's not going to be smoked and how to abuse it and things like that. So, you know, I'm in the middle ground. I think there's some changes that just kind of need to be made to these maps. But in general, I like them a lot. So
I think to speak to what you just said about
that,
abusing things and stuff like that, I feel like we're just lacking tutorial content in a lot of ways. That's how people learn how to play CS. They watch the pros play, or there's tutorial content out there that they consume, and that's what teaches them how to play the game. I think once we start getting some of that kind of content out there, whether it be more tournaments more regularly, whether it be you know, more tutorial content coming out, because, like, right now I feel like the subreddit's just plagued by people, you know, critiquing the game or, you know, bug issues or whatever. And they're not very supportive of the tournaments yet. We don't really see a whole lot of tutorial content. We've seen some, like, highlight clip content that gets, you know, spread around, but I think that we just need more time to get that tutorial content out there to kind of help instruct, like, what nades are necessary and into opening up the maps. But I think in general your take was well balanced and kind of addressed everything. Davey, what do you think about some of these maps?
Personally, I'm not a fan of maps where you need to watch like 4 or 5 angles where they can come from, or even 3, 4. I like it more if you have 1 or 2 angles to take care about, and the enemy knows that as well, and that's how you create a battle. Because you know there's going to be a guy there, he knows, but you know he knows you're going to be coming there, and that's when the individual skill comes in, right? You know how I'm going to outplay him, going to bait him, going to just straight out run in and instant headshot him, whatever. That's what I like about the maps with not a lot of angles. I feel like CoD 4 had maps with a lot of angles to take care of. Maybe even CoD 2, but I guess I didn't have a lot of issues there. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I just think if that can be downsized, the angles you need to take care of, that's going to do a lot. And what I think is an issue right now with the current maps is the alleyways being really tight. But that could be because of the SMG being strong and all the peak advantage things. So it's all like in correlation with each other, you know. The maps, will they be good? Well, the maps are gonna feel different after if they're gonna be SMG nerfs. So right now I feel like either widen up the maps or nerf the SMG or whatever. Like I don't know which is gonna be the best, but it's gonna be related with each other. What else? I think because of the bomb exploding like relatively fast, I think, and that's another thing. Are the maps too small, or are the bomb spots too wide from each other, or is the bomb timer too limited? Like how much is it right now? I don't know, 30 seconds.
40?
40?
I think it's 40 or 45.
And it takes
Something like that.
7.5 to
I might get
defuse.
completely wrong. I don't know.
It takes
I don't know.
7.5 to defuse, so...
I think it feels like you don't have a lot of time to retake bomb sites at this point. And again, that could be because of the bomb slots being too... Or you fix it by either putting the bomb spots closer to each other or making the bomb timer longer.
Or defuse time shorter.
I don't know which is the best. I can't, like, that's not my job, I guess.
I think that was actually an interesting idea. Thus, I hadn't even considered reducing the defuse time, because something that I really liked about CoD 2 was that, like, when someone tapped the bomb, it felt like because you were so slow, like your post plant position, like you couldn't run a flank all the way around to and come back another angle if you're trying to like 1v1 as the attacker defending planting the bomb. You couldn't really move that far. So once you knew a player's general position, like it became that 1v1 duel, you know, like you knew where he was, he knew where you were, and it was just who's going to peek the angle better. And you're like, is he going to peek you when you're sticking the bomb? I feel like if I'm holding the bomb diffusing in this game and the guy peeks me, it's like I don't have time to get off and run away and like take another battle. So maybe like reducing the diffuse time turns it into a much more predictable 1v1 where like the guy has to peek you, like he has to, you know, make a quicker decision about whether, like, I don't like that right now. Like you said, you have to travel across the map for an extended period of time, which maybe wastes up to, I mean, I think on most maps, I feel like bomb site to bomb site, I think we timed it around roughly 20 seconds to get there. If you're like fully rotating out of like a position on a map, depending on what map it is. And that's a lot of time to be burned off the clock straight away. You have about 10 seconds to find as many kills as you can and get on that bomb. And it's just like, you know, if maybe we reduce that to a 5-second defuse, suddenly you have time to at least take 2 duels and then face a 1v1 with a few seconds to
I do
spare.
pose this one question, though. I know it takes a long time to rotate, but it's also really hard to plant right now because of the fear of nades. You take one guy out to fight when you're planting. Once you tap it that one time, they know where the bomb is trying to plant. And so I feel like that buys you a good amount of time to rotate even before they start planting the bomb. So does that factor in at all to what you're saying?
I mean, yes and no, but understand that like this kind of a game is totally, I mean, the whole game is information on defense, is figuring out where the allies are going and where you can be shot from, right? And a lot of times it's easy for us to kind of get information because teams aren't totally well stratted. They have a lot of tells and stuff like that. But, you know, this game kind of caters to, like once you've made contact on a bomb site, you kind of have to go as allies. Like there's no stopping. Like you said, it's tough to actually get the bomb down. You're not going to be able to push all the way up to a bomb site on derailed, have battles there with 30 seconds left on the clock, and then get back to B and get a bomb down if there's somebody still in that bomb site. So like yeah, you're right. But at the same time, it's like you don't really have a choice. And I think teams are just going to have to get better at this point at like being able to plant a bomb, watching for nades. That's something in NA that like I think took players a very quick time to learn, is that like I think it was in the first tournament we saw our first set nades from other teams, and we immediately went into a server and just like found, you know, bomb site nades and stuff like that. And I think that's something that players are going to be quickly indoctrinated to, is just like when you're planting a bomb, you're going to have a lot of risks. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier about the nade usage and how the currency meta might affect it, because planting the bomb is difficult. And we've played teams where they go double heavy nade and just sit passive and just nade the bomb site twice until their teammates are in a position to nade too. And then suddenly that's 40 seconds you just wasted tapping the bomb. Maybe you lost a guy or two trying to plant. Those rounds are the worst. And I
that
think
was
that's
literally
like,
every round of
saying.
Davy's team playing Article 51 in that one Blitzkrieg battle tournament on Coastal in particular. Was like people were constantly getting stalled on planting the bomb because it's set, particularly on the B bombs. Like, because you can't really set nade stop a plan on A house that well, but yeah, on B you can, like, a lot. So that was like the whole game was basically waiting for that to happen. Like, I think it was Davey the one trying to plant the bomb. You'd go in, plant, look up real quick. Like, can I keep this or not? Like, so it's definitely an interesting thing. I think from my perspective, like just from a spectating perspective and a commentary perspective, I haven't had really issues with any of the maps. The only one that's been kind of triggering is Derailed, simply because you have to cross mid to go cinema if you're allies, and those set nade timings at middle makes things feel like you're just constantly delayed. And so it's kind of a weird thing because, yeah, allies have a lot of different ways to get in that cinema bomb site, whether it's upper or lower cinema, short, through broken building, whatever the case may be, if you can somehow flank middle and get behind their spawn. But because those nade timings come in, it gives Axis so much time to take cinema control for themselves and deny you basically 2 of those routes. So I don't know, like that's the only one that's been kind of weird to me. Everything else has been kind of okay and fun to watch, and it's more of like, well, people just haven't figured out how to play yet. We all know that. Like, it really has just come down a lot in these tournaments to like individual skill, who's out dueling their opponent, who's fragging a little bit better, maybe who's getting lucky with the set nade early on. Like, if someone just tried to go balls to the wall and just ignore a set nade and try to risk it and they get caught by it. But yeah, so I don't know if it's more of people need to learn the maps better and like the meta needs to develop more, or if there's actual like tweaks that need to be made. Like, I'm not really sure. I've never been a fan of maps where you can just get burned crossing middle and you have to cross middle to get to a site, like Dust 2 and Counter-Strike on the CT side. Like, I've never been a fan of those interactions where you're forced to get owned just trying to get into a bomb site as a defender. But this time it's the other way around. Like, it's just early information for Axis. They get like a tag, or they can just slow down your timings, and I don't know, man. Like, that's
I don't know what you're talking about, Dust. I really enjoyed getting opt through mid doors every single round against Kenny S. It was a blast.
Yeah.
I love being a beat bomb side player on Dust 2.
I once saw ESWC Masters 2008 in Paris. I was there for CoD 4 tournament, but CS was there as well. And the final was MTW against Fnatic. This was the 2008 MTW, right? Is that the year they won everything? Or was it Fnatic? Whatever.
I wasn't in 1.6.
Fnatic was, I think, right after that, before Navi. Or no, it was right. I don't know. Who was on the Fnatic roster? And I'll tell you. That's all I need to know.
This was the Gux era.
So it was like post Get Right? Yeah, okay. With Get Right? Yeah, never mind. Whatever.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But MTW had Sunday, right? Sunday, you remember him?
Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, and he was Dust 2, and he was the guy as terrorist popping the double doors. That was the most insane thing ever. I saw every single round. I'm sure it's on YouTube. I was there in the arena. Every single round, he hit a shot through the double doors on Fnatic, even if they smoked it or not. That was just insane. Like they had experience to have the right timings and shit. But Fnatic as well, right? So like, I agree on what you say there, Dust. That like that mid exchange that you are forced to have is maybe not as interesting as it could be.
It's just everyone waiting around, like hoping they don't get naded, is what it turns into. Like, I'd rather it be set up for straight up sniper duels or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean okay, so you just hit the nail on the head. My issue with it is that, like, okay, and Reddit has disagreed with me on this from the start, but that feel of being forced to get into a bomb site and like having to brave nades and a sniper battle is for me COD 2 Burgundy, where like you had all 5 nades basically going to stop that B push and the B plant. So what do? You pick the cross and keep the Germans out of the bomb site as long as possible and nade them back. And this game, Derailed, kind of has that similar dynamic where the mid cross is being constantly naded. You have to wait for it. You almost have to smoke cross. And then fucking the sniper battle is like the coup de grace where, if you actually go for an early timing where you have a good spawn and you're trying to cross mid, like the scope still beats you there. You can still get picked going to cinema, which I don't know if like there's any way that can be mitigated. But what I would love to have is just be like, as a scope, me personally, the best way that I can help my team is by, being able to safely peek something and make sure that they can cross, but there's nowhere to peek from. So basically you're forced to wait for nades and smoke mid and not even take the battle at all now.
And to be fair, if only one map is like that, maybe it's not that bad. Go ahead, Davey.
Derailed allies at this point actually is viable to not have a sniper. To have him on default or whatever and just attack a bomb site, rush it or whatever. Like, that's how far it's come because of the mid-smoke nade trade, I think. And
in NA, at least, the meta's already changed. It's like, no one picks mid. People pick alt. They go, I mean, there's a lot of different sniper peaks that are kind of being invented, and we saw it when we got smoked on Derailed last tournament, Dust. We lost the first one in double OT. It was the same team. It was Wicked, NST, and those guys. Mm-hmm. And like Wicked was doing things on the map that I had never seen an allied scope do before. He was going towards A. He was finding picks on our A players. He was being a nuisance on other parts of the map. And like I was just itching for a sniper battle mid. I'm like trying to find where this guy's playing, and it just wasn't coming. And it was actually really educational because it made me realize that like a lot of the strategy in this game is viable. Like we've invented a couple things that like we haven't seen in any other tournaments before alone on Derailed, just because it's such a weird map where like you can exploit things that aren't readily apparent if you just were to run around the map for 5 minutes. I don't think like smashing into B every round is going to be a meta for very long on either region, just because there's so many things that you can do at mid and in alt where I think A is ultimately going to be the harder bomb site to hold. And like you mentioned kind of on Coastal, it's like it's not a bomb site you can nade. Things are easily smoked off in the A bomb site, and once you have graveyard control as the allies, it's not that big of a nightmare to put the bomb down. I just think Derailed in general is like you kind of prefaced with a map that is frustrating for everyone, but once everyone gets a better idea of how the map is played and how to exploit different things, it'll be a little less stressful. But it does kind of rely on utility usage, I think, a little more than other maps. And that kind of is detrimental to pubs if we're going to balance it for comp. Because in a pub, I can just jump out mid as an ally and take a mid battle all day, and it's like no problem because nobody knows a nade. But as soon as a casual player hops into a competitive match, it's a totally different experience because there's players that know what they're doing.
I feel like that Derailed set nade from Axis to allied mid is the most known nade in Battalion right now. Everyone, I feel like, knows how to throw that nade now.
I was like closed beta day one. Where I like saw 10 Twitter clips of people teaching people how to throw that nade.
Saw someone five man it like one time, like 5 kills.
Yeah, who was that?
It was a guy from Western Kings.
Yeah, Narf, I think. Yeah.
But other maps, it hasn't been as bad initial set nades. Like, you can still get initial set nade kills, obviously, but I feel like Derailed's the one where, as allies, you're, like, the most threatened by a set nade frag because you have to go through that piece of the map, and that nade's probably going to be there. It's, like, the biggest set nade threat probably in the game right now, but any other thoughts on maps real quick? Keep going.
Yeah, just one more thing about that is, like, that's kind of why I want another alternative to fighting mid as allies is that, that map in particular, I actually kind of like that there's a lot of strategy involved in how you use nades as axis. Like, you can throw your nades quick, you can stagger them, you can throw them short, you can throw them deep, you can save them for barrels, hole, broken area, whatever you want to call that. You can save them for tank, like you can save them for bomb plants. There's way too many options, it feels like, because the allies don't have enough to just counter for a fast play. But as I said, I just think like, once you realize the Axis aren't nading mid anymore, the B rush is open, and that's why Derailed might be a much better map a month from now than it is without significant changes.
Davey, any other map notes you wanted to throw in here?
It's related to maps, I guess. The bomb being as wall bangable as it is right now, I think that needs a nerf. Because, for instance, the A bomb side. Sure, the meta could shift that you want to be attacking A, but if there are 2 guys hidden in the sticking on the in the sniper window as access, right? You know what I mean up there.
Come on, derailed, right?
Yeah,
Like,
access spawn, right?
Replan had that clip, right? Or Replan?
Yeah, it was Replan.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pentas guy, right? Against us. Well, I mean that from that position, you can have like a pre-aimed spot there, right, where you'll always be able to wall bang a bomb, smoke or not. I think that needs to be nerfed because it's gonna be too easy to get people to wall bang those bombs, and that's gonna make the meta that you have to push through the bomb site to this, like in this case, the access spawn or whatever. And that I don't think that's a really good or fun thing to have. But I just believe that the bomb shouldn't be as wall bangable as it is right now.
Okay. So let's shift focus to the actual competitive side even more now, because obviously we've seen some tournaments already online. We've seen for the last couple of weeks, like every weekend, there seems to be some tournaments going on for NA and EU. I've been commentating some of the Blitzkrieg battles in Europe, but I know there's been stuff going on in NA as well. And so I just kind of wanted to get a take from each of you about like your respective scenes, how competition for you has been so far. And this can even tie into scrims too, because I think scrims are like a part of the tournament circuit in the sense that you're playing against the same teams, that you're playing in tournaments and scrims, and you're practicing for the tournaments in the scrim. So I just kind of wanted to get like a general take of like how you felt about competition so far in Battalion for your region. And so I'll let Davey take it away for Europe.
Competition, well, it's still early, you know. I guess there's a few names that pop out at this point, like Penta, the Bang are doing good. Who else? Oslots were doing good, but they like changed 2 players, so they're now called Little Cats or something. But to talk about how the competitive teams are right now, I don't know. It just seems so early, and there's going to be so many changes the coming weeks, most likely. It's a hard conversation to have, I think. And
how have you enjoyed competing, I guess? Like, how has it been for you and your team, like, just playing?
Well, scrims were really, like, fun. I mean, more fun than trying to queue competitive. Even though that's not really, like, a huge issue in EU, but it has been an issue. But okay, but if you scrim, then you know you'll have a game, right? But, like, scrimming has been fun. Doing tactics has been fun. There is definitely a depth in the game, and that's good to have. What else? But okay, scrims has been fun up to a point where you know that people are abusing, for example, the A bomb smoke on coastal.
Oh god, that's the worst.
People actually do that?
Yeah.
I'd kick him out of my fucking server. No way. Get out of here. That's broken.
There was a team in the last Blitzkrieg final. I'm not gonna like straight mention them, but
go for it. I'll tell you who it was. It was Saint Six from the Bang, and then also Sam from ATG. The whole tournament, that whole map series. Yeah, it was rough.
Yeah, I mean that should, it should be a gentleman's agreement to not do that.
Yeah, probably.
100%. I'm sorry for you guys. What?
Like it was like a normal thing to not abuse some parts. Like I don't know, it was a thing for the community to not.
Imagine
was like,
abusing bugs in a tournament with no freaking prize pool in the early access of a game. Like it was disappointing to see, like as a spectator for sure that was going on. We try to kind of avoid it as much as possible, obviously, but like just the fact you knew it was happening was just like, come on, man. Like why is this happening right now? But continue.
Continue. Where was I?
You were talking about how
scrims were fun outside of the people using bugs.
Outside of that shit.
Yeah, and scrims are fun until the point where you come back to the earlier conversation about Pega's advantage and all that shit. Where I don't feel like adjusting to that because I feel like that should be fixed. So I'm still slow peaking. I'm still getting wrecked.
Can't wait to frag you on land, Davey.
I'm actually
slow peak, insta death.
Yeah, write it down in your tactic book. I'm actually curious how it feels on LAN. Because CoD 2 was totally different on LAN than online.
It was amazing.
It was so much better. It was just great.
Yeah.
So
That's
good.
why some teams shown a lot more on LAN than online. But well, I'm hoping it's better on LAN, but I'm just hoping they fix it for online as well. It's a lot better because right now it's just not good.
Have you enjoyed the online cup so far in Europe, Davey?
Yeah, we only played 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
We came 3rd in Blitzkrieg 2.
Mm-hmm.
We lost semis against Penta pretty hard.
Yes.
They played really well against us on Derailed. But this was also after the quadruple overtime.
Dude, that was rough, man. That quadruple overtime against Article 51. That's probably the craziest game of Battalion so far. People should definitely go Google that and find it. But yeah, the Article 51 quadruple overtime coastal game with Assy Ass. I have to call you guys Assy Ass, dude. Like, that's just the greatest way to say
I watched
it.
the whole thing live. It was beautiful.
That was actually a team in CoD 2 with Knaller and QWERTY.
Okay.
That's where we got it from. But okay. But that game, man, we were 12-7 in front and we gave it away. It was stupid. I mean, they did well as well, I guess.
Still triggered to this day. Continue.
No. No. They just suck.
Yeah, I got you.
Wow. Toxic.
What else? All right, yeah, the Penta game. Well, we just got rigged there, but I was done playing after that overtime as well. To be honest, I just didn't care anymore. It's different when you play for LAN or whatever, but like on just online cups, it's like concentration is hard to maintain entire day. We also played last weekend the fast frag thing that you have in NA as well.
Mm-hmm.
We won it actually against the Bang were earlier out against. We won it against like the new Ocelot lineup thing.
Little cats,
Right.
yeah.
But that's the thing. That's the thing I missed a lot in like the last 7 years, right? It's competing in tournaments and shit. Like seeing you progress on a ladder. That's really cool, and that's what makes me excited for the Clan Wars thing that Bulkhead have planned. That's gonna be like clan base. Lex, you knew clan base, right? Or wasn't like?
It wasn't an NA, but I was aware of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was just amazing. Like in Europe, if they can bring that back and actually have it in game. That's so cool. That's gonna be for the fall, but I'm
Do you
really
think top pro teams would even play in that though? Or do you like would it replace scrims maybe? Like just go do a clan war in game instead of playing a scrim?
As far as
That's what it's for, right?
I don't know. Like I thought it was for casuals to make teams in the game and like compete as a team in the game. I didn't know if pros would be focused on it or not.
We played clan base back in the day because by clan base you qualified for the Euro Cups, and Euro Cups were like the biggest things back then.
Okay.
Godfragger.
That was like the European Championships or whatever. But I've also heard of the Clan Wars thing in Battalion, that through Clan Wars you will be able to qualify for leagues or whatever, or even maybe LAN tournaments. Like that would be a good move maybe for them. So that's really exciting to have. And also, like, Clan Base was really fun to play as a mixed team, just with friends or whatever. Just if you're off. If you don't have 5 on your team to scrim, just use your friends or whatever. Like for a casual fan base as well, to see your name climb on a ladder, that's exciting, and that should do a lot for the player base as well.
Yeah, I just didn't know if pro teams would use Clan Wars. I figured they would just play like in leagues and LAN tournaments and stuff. I didn't know how much they would dabble in Clan Wars. Like if you're like a top team or whatever. But maybe there's a way they can incentivize playing Clan Wars if you're a pro team, and it could work out.
I think the answer is I mean they've already kind of spoken openly about partnerships with ESL. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Clan Wars client, I mean obviously upon release it won't be like this, but I think the intention is to kind of act as though it was sort of like an ESEA client where you can just go into it, and I don't know if it's going to be a clan-based clone exactly, or if like there's going to be scrims that you can find or matches there or what, but at the end of the day, I think like having that kind of in-client experience where, even if you have to pay however much a month for it, it's better than, having to go through a third party. At least like this is directly from the devs. This is something that's going to be accessible to all players, and not something that like, you need to promote super hardcore because it's already in the game.
Right.
I think in general, it's going to be probably the best thing that's going to happen to this game as far as what it can do for popularity and competition, right?
Yeah. Let's backtrack a bit, Lex,
that...
though. Can you talk a little bit about
Sure,
just like how you've enjoyed competition in NA? Because I kind of posed Davey that question for Europe. So I kind of wanted to ask you about how your experience has been competing in some of the NA tournaments and scrims and stuff like that. Obviously, Dust is like now one of the new best players in North America and should be on a pro team soon. But
Dust
anyway.
is a god. He had that one tap on a tank on Coastal last night. What a legend.
Anyway, go ahead.
It was to me. I mean, I was playing scrims, I think, from the closed beta. I think that was the earliest we started scrimming, or maybe we were like queuing 5 queues against other teams.
Yeah, I remember seeing
actually.
that on stream.
So that's not entirely true. But anyway, and no, you didn't see any closed alpha content on stream, Dust. Closed beta you did, but I did not violate any kind of NDA. What I was gonna say though, when I had first done it, I was actually like instantly hooked, and it was bad because it was like love at first sight. Where I was so burnt out on CS over the last like year and a half, and I was ready to quit for anything. And when Battalion closed beta dropped, I played like 3 or 4 scrims one night, where we were just 5-queuing against other teams. So I think it was the Western Kings guys, who are arguably like a number 2 or number 3 team right now in NA, I guess. If you like want to talk about skill, maybe the best. Anyway, they were really good players that, I mean, they were all Counter-Strike and they weren't necessarily like totally familiar with how to play the game yet, but I mean, they were good sports about it, and they were super interested in playing the game, and that sparked my interest from the get-go, because, you know, if these players from other communities can already be be competitive on their like first day in the game, you know, this is going to be fun. And certainly over the first 2 weeks of the game, man, like we were playing every team that we could, and we were excited, like, because we had been putting time in since alpha, so we were obviously like a little bit ahead of everybody else. We were excited when teams started like putting up a fight against us, and we actually had, I mean, we didn't like to talk about it, because when you're winning everything, it's really easy to just have everyone hate you. But when we had like lost our first scrims, it was like frustrating at first, but it was exciting because that meant like other teams were adapting and learning the game at a similar pace at that point. And so in NA, there's probably right now only like maybe 6 or 7 teams that are a set 5 and are dedicating time into the game that are also talented. So I don't know if there's like top teams. People call us the top team, but it's too early to you know, even say that there's, you know, really good teams or like pro teams or anything like that right now, at least here in NA.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's exciting, though, is that, you know, when these things that we talked about earlier in the podcast, like fixed matchmaking, leagues being announced, LANs being announced, all those COD 4 and COD 2 pros that live in NA and have other jobs and lives now, that have other priorities and stuff, that still play the game for fun and pug occasionally, are suddenly going to be like, I'm willing to dedicate a few hours of my day every day to come and get better at this game and compete. And that's something that it's missing right now, is just kind of like a drive factor for a lot of the people that want to form a solid team. And I think it's kind of been disheartening to a point. Like, we didn't play almost at all up until that last Fast Frags tournament that we lost, because we just, and this is going to sound so cocky, but we were winning everything. It was boring. It was like the competition had kind of folded for a few days, and so we just took a break, came back and lost, and it felt good because it rejuvenated our motivation to kind of just, you know, even if it's not going to be a full-time thing, and we can't always spend every day going over strats or anything, but definitely NA is coming along as far as setting an example for the players that will come after us in the coming weeks and months, because those guys, I mean, they'll be able to look at us and see exactly what we're doing, and be able to adapt much quicker, I think.
Yeah, I think as like a spectator and like a commentator, the game has been a lot of fun to watch. I think it broadcasts really easily, because I think it does have similarities to CS:GO and how easy it is to like switch between players and how to get like a general overview of what's going on the entirety of the map. It's not like too hectic, too hard to spectate. I think once we get like good observers, dedicated observers in the game like we have in Counter-Strike, I think it'll be like a really good spectator experience. Also, Spec UI needs a lot of work. But I can see the silver lining is my point. Like I see the light at the end of the tunnel for Spec UI, and so I think from like a spectator standpoint, it's pretty easy to follow. Like it's kind of similar to CS, where I think you grasp the basics pretty easily, but there are layers there if you want to learn the deeper facets of the game. And so I think that's been really cool. Obviously, the meta hasn't developed a lot, so like as far as tactics and strategy goes, definitely a lot of teams don't really have it. I think the coolest things I've seen is a couple of different spec executes that Ocelots did have on Liberation on B, but now they're dead, so rest in peace, I guess. We've seen a lot of it. I mean, there's definitely still some people who know some tac nades and some good smokes to get them somewhere and stuff like that, but I think strategy still needs to come a long way. But at the very least, what's been cool about spectating and commentating these games is I feel like we've at least began to identify some players who have some real talent in this game. Like, not to toot, Ass's own horn here while he's here, but like Toxia has been like probably the most impressive SMG I've watched play so far in Europe. I think Duffer is a good shout from Article 51. A couple other guys certainly, a lot of good scopes in Europe that I've seen. Cordy's been one of them, but certainly Replin has probably been like the #1 for me as far as like how impressive he's been with the scope. But certainly some other guys like Komaksu and I'm trying to think here. Couple different scopes out there like Blackmane and Socklin have been pretty impressive. There's definitely some
already rage quit, by the way.
What's that?
Blackmane has already rage quitted the game, by the way.
Oh well, rest in peace to him.
Not a surprise. It really isn't a surprise if you know him.
Right. So there's definitely I feel like scope players have been like the real highlight players so far. That have like the most highlight clips, but certainly like I said, like Toxia and Duffer with SMGs have been really impressive. J Money in general has been like kind of cool, but I know there's like some weird controversy around him for whatever reason, but I think he's been an impressive player to watch, and some of the other band guys have been pretty good.
On the downside that like you mean cheat accusations?
Yeah, unfortunately, but I don't know if there's like it doesn't seem like there's really any weight behind them.
They shouldn't be there because like my teammate Supreme played with J Money in CoD 2. CoD 2 has been played till like last
because the Ocelots guys were doing it. Like they were the main guys who've been playing CoD 2 this whole time.
They went to LANs and J Money as well. Like he went to LANs and he performed. So like it's like he has proven himself to be a skilled player.
Yeah, he's been fun to watch for sure. Saint Six has been pretty good on that team as well.
There's a lot of Call of Duty players from back in the day coming back. Okay, like me and others, and Article 51 and them. But like the Bang and J Money, they have been playing Call of Duties like the entire time. They've been playing CoD 2 for like 10 years, so they are warm. They have like the reflex, the muscle reflexes.
Right.
So it's not unusual to see them perform really well right now.
Yeah, certainly the like Elzoy and some of the Ocelot guys have been good. I think Suspect or Sus also from the Bang has been pretty impressive. I think the point is like because the meta hasn't developed yet, it's hard to identify like for sure top teams, and also because a lot of these teams, even like the Bang, who's made the finals of every Blitzkrieg battle, they've had a different 5 every time they've done it. Right? Like they had like the leader has like a recent addition to their team as a scope, who's been pretty impressive. But before they were using like I think Aerox, like the first tournament they played with the scope, and then they've had. Like J Money wasn't even in the one that they won. Like he wasn't even on their team for the tournament they actually did win. So I think that's what's made it really difficult from like an outsider, spectator, commentator. I don't really know how to identify top teams yet because some teams don't even really have set 5s yet. Article 51 and the Bang are like perfect examples of teams that have made deep runs in some of these cups but don't have a set 5 yet. But we can at least identify that the game's fun to watch. It's pretty easy to watch, especially once Spec UI gets fixed. I think it'll get even easier. And it's been exciting to watch, like seeing these crazy individual plays. Or these like multi-frag moments or different things like that have been a lot of fun. And at the very least, if we can't identify top teams, at least we can identify talented players who are able to put out like highlight reel moments that are fun to watch. And so like as a commentator, I feel great about this. I enjoy it. I still have to learn how to commentate it in a lot of ways because I come from Counter-Strike, and in general, this game's faster paced, so that changes how you have to pace your commentary, especially as a color commentator. It's a lot harder to come in mid-round because there's always action, it feels like. So I'm still learning, but it's still like a hell of a lot of fun to watch and follow. And I guess, Lex, like for you, like we've kind of been tossing names around. Has there been any names that have impressed you in EU or NA that kind of stack up to some of these names that we've talked about?
Oh, I mean, in EU, it's always a treat watching their matches because, I mean, sorry, I won't speak for the casual viewer or somebody who's just tuning in the game for the first time, but for me, Like a lot of these dudes from COD 1, 2, 4, like all three of those games that, when I was 14, I make this I say this all the time to NA pros. I'm just like, when I was 14 years old, I downloaded your config, right? Like just that kind of like that's like my attitude towards these guys is like, man, before there was like Twitch and the ability to watch matches, like I watched all these guys' demos. Like I have a lot of respect for a lot of the guys from the EU scene and certainly in the NA scene that like, have come back and shown that they still have like the same instincts that, made you good in COD 1, 2, and 4. And maybe those aren't all mutually exclusive, but definitely it kind of carries over where if you were good at those games, like this one doesn't feel too strange. I don't feel like if you played a lot of those hours in those games, like Battalion seemed really easy to pick up for me, at least, even coming from CS. So those guys, like, I'm not surprised at all that they're, some of the best EU players. I think in the first early tournaments, like I watched all of the Ocelots matches I could just because it looked like they were ahead of everyone else. In NA, everyone talks about Dizzy as kind of like being the young talent in NA because he just has ridiculous highlight reels all the time.
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of people don't know. He was on Mythic on my CS team for a couple seasons, not too long ago. I'd say like within the last year and a half.
Yeah,
2 years maybe. And he was a much younger man than he was now. I mean, I would have called him a kid then, but now he's actually absolutely in the last 2 years kind of grown up a lot and developed as a player, and I think he just hasn't played in any of the tournaments yet. So I'm excited to see what he can do because, if some of the best NA talent isn't playing in the NA tournaments, then how can you accurately assess the NA scene?
Yeah.
And a few of the teams actually like have some really sick players. Man, this is gonna escape me for a second, but like we were playing Czech 6 last night even, and like you mentioned Schaefer. There's like players from other games that are coming over and, they might not be the sickest players right now, but they're holding their own and they're actually playing pretty smart Battalion. And that's like impressive as hell to me. Like Grego just came from Overwatch essentially and had never played a game like COD before and was playing through the alpha with us. And it was kind of really fun to see how quickly a guy like him from with no Call of Duty experience could pick up the game and think about it critically and actually, automatically just put himself in a position to be a top player. I mean, there's players like that all over NA, but I can't, outside of teams like Janitors, it's Western Kings and Czech 6. Like, there's only a couple other teams that have like set rosters right now. So certainly there's a lot of talent, but like, who's going to compete and who are we going to be talking about in a few months?
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this. Like, I assume that some of you have watched some of the tournaments as well, perhaps, whether it be VODs or live when you guys aren't playing yourselves. How have you felt about watching the game so far from, like, a player's perspective? And either one of you can go first on this, but I'm just kind of curious, like, because I went back and watched the VODs to self-critique my commentary, but I'm in, like, a bubble on, like, what I think about spectating. But I'd like to know, like, your perspectives when you've watched the tournament so far.
I've enjoyed, like, watching the games. I've always watched the finals, I guess, because I assume that's usually the most exciting thing to watch. But I mean, it's definitely great. There's a lot of action. There's a lot happening in the game, in the matches. I just think it's gonna be a lot more exciting to watch if SMGs get nerfed, and you get more like aim battles instead of people just or if Peeker's advantage gets nerfed. If, like the discussion we had earlier, one of the like, okay, so maybe firstly the Peeker's advantage thing. So like rifles, for example, like Karna and Yank can have the reflex on a SMG jumping across nearby. Like kills like that are awesome. Like Knaller had a 1v2 against Article 51 like that. That's just insane if you can pull it off right now when there's still the Peeker's advantage, right? There's gonna be a lot more happening if that gets nerfed, the advantage. And then those shots are just incredible to watch. like one taps and all that. That's just really, really cool to have. And still, there is the possibility to have multi-frags as well. Stuff like that just gets exciting, you know. And I loved watching the earlier Call of Duties. So I think there really is a market for a spectator esport in Battalion as well.
For me, I was kind of, I'll be honest, I was hoping for much better observer tools by like early access launch. I don't know why I was expecting that or anything like that. It's just if you're the issue that I have with games that want to be esports, and this doesn't pertain to Battalion, I just mean like Overwatch, anything, PUBG, you know, these games inherently have huge issues with being able to spectate the game and have it be fun to watch. The games like PUBG are slow and boring, and you don't really get to catch any of the action because it all happens in the last minute of the game. And then for Overwatch, and that's obviously an exaggerated example, but Overwatch to me, I mean, even as somebody who kind of enjoyed playing the game casually and maybe tinkered around a little bit with competing in it, I don't think it's like, you know, the most amazing, entertaining thing to watch. And obviously I'm biased, but CS has come a long way. CS wasn't always, you know, perfect, and observing's gotten a lot better. Auto director used to be the worst, and observer tools weren't great then either. And now it's like one of the best esports you can watch on any platform. So Battalion for me, I mean, the first thing that like you want to have down before you have any kind of big tournaments or big LAN events is a good way to observe them, because if nobody can watch it, or if it's shit to watch, then what the fuck's the point?
I don't know if it's about tools as much as about staffing. Like, we need dedicated observers in Battalion once we get to bigger tournaments, just like we have in CSGO.
But even think about CSGO. I mean, you were around us, that people relied on auto director, and auto director got pretty good. Yeah. It used to be really bad. It's good if you're on a delay, I mean,
especially. Like, if you're on a 2-minute delayed Go TV, it'll always get the kills.
Certainly. Okay, so that is true. But I just mean watching the game, even if you were streaming it on your own private channel, like I could go cast an ECA match right now with auto director on, and I would catch most of the action, not all of it, wouldn't have all the big plays, and you'd be caught on some dumb moments with the camera. But I think in the early stages, when you definitely don't have staffing, like being able to have good observer tools to not necessarily, I don't need like map overlays and being able to draw on map. I know it's already in the game, but like just being able to watch the
biggest issue I've had is player bars, by the way. That's the biggest one.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's super glitchy for spectating, right? So like you have gun models bugged, you have scope models bugged, and all that stuff that will eventually be ironed out and fixed. Mm-hmm. I just hope that that doesn't fall too far low on the priority list, because Battalion, and this kind of ties into what I was saying about the nade meta earlier, is that, you know, if the game gets slowed down at all because for any reason, it'll be easier to spectate in general, and you can kind of get in the action a little bit more, and fast rounds will be harder to observe.
Yeah.
But I think it needs a good mix and the ability to capture all of that before you can really give a viewer experience that's worthy of how good the game feels when you play it.
Right.
And I think from I mean, I don't have the most casting experience, Dust, but I mean, we've worked around each other in this space before, and I think as casting goes, you're right. Like this is definitely going to be a game where being able to commentate at a fast pace is going to be a necessary thing. Like,
I don't even know if being a traditional color commentator is going to be possible in this game. I feel like you're going to have to be a hybrid commentator and be able to do a little bit of analyzing and play-by-play to get through.
I'm not even kidding when I say this, but we went back and I actually talked to somebody about it, but I went and watched back like a Fast Frags tournament match of ours, and I watched the audio on, or the video on, like 1.5 times speed, and it was like the best casting that I had ever heard, because it just felt like he was keeping up with the action because he was talking so quick. But you realize that, like, you know, with all that action going on around the map, it's going to take casters a little bit of time to get not necessarily acclimated. Like, I think you've already picked up the game okay enough as it is to where you have a pretty good idea what you're talking about. But if you're not a player, if you're just a casual caster trying to hop into the game, it's probably pretty daunting. I mean, not only are you having game crash issues, observing issues, stuff like that right now, but the game meta is always shifting, and it's hard to capture action when you don't really know what's going on in all the rounds.
Yeah, the biggest issue is also just not really having a really good ability to go back and like watch former games.
Demos.
I mean, if you watch VODs, yeah, but you only get one person's POV. Like as a commentator, I want to be able to watch a map overview demo of everyone. That way I figure out how they're playing. And I think once we get there, that'll help research be easier for people like myself to get better informed on commentary. I think that the other thing is like you're always dancing this fine line in a fast-paced game of, yeah, I need to be able to talk fast to keep up, but if you talk too fast and people can understand you. Also, if you're trying to sit there and cover every single kill in a round, you're going to talk yourself to death because you'll see like 4 death notifications in the blink of an eye on the screen. And so you have to be able to manage the chaos as a commentator and just be like, okay, what's most important about what just happened in that last couple of seconds? I don't need to cover every single frag. I need to cover what's most important. So you have to really prioritize. So yeah, it's definitely a learning experience, I think, and I think it'll only get better over time. David, did you want to add anything else to any of this before we move to the next topic?
What was the main question?
Just like how you felt about observing and spectating the game, or watching tournaments.
Well, yeah, I think I answered it first. But another thing is what I think about stuff like this, like tools for spectating and for casters like you, Dust. That's a thing I have a lot of trust in this development team, that they understand that it is needed, that it's really important to have, and if people like you will be involved in saying what will be best to have, I think they'll listen, and by like this, like I guess at some point they will have this ironed out, and there will be a really good caster or spectator experience to have. I'm positive about that. I know they understand what it's needed to have a competitive game.
Mm-hmm. I can say this. Me and Howard have been in touch every single tournament I've commentated throughout the tournament. After every game, I would message him something new, like that I noticed like that game that I wanted different. And like we've compiled like a collaborative Google document. It's like a few pages long about all the different tweaks we want to spec mode. And that's been an ongoing conversation for the last month. So just to give people a little bit of insight on how responsive they've been, and the fact that there's definitely discussions going on about spec mode in particular from my end, as well as Howard's been like the main person I've talked to about it. So that's definitely an ongoing thing, and I hope people can have a little faith that they're definitely looking to work hard in those areas. One of the last topics I want to talk about, guys, is obviously like just like a couple days before we're recording this video, the first LAN got announced for Insomnia 62 or I-Series, however you want to call it. It's going to be what's like the last weekend of March into April 1st or April 2nd or something like that. It's going to be, I think, a 3-day tournament, $10,000 prize pool. It's from the Blitzkrieg Battle people. What's that?
10,000 pounds.
Yeah, sorry, 10,000 pounds. So that's closer to 15,000 USD, like maybe 13 point something.
We should like I feel that's a significant difference.
Yeah, it's definitely significant. So my apologies there. So anyway, it's going to be taking place, like I said, Insomnia. It's going to be run by the same people who do Blitzkrieg Battle, but I know that Bulkhead's somewhat involved, I think, in helping with the prize pool and, you know, just helping them out as they need, but it's still definitely run by, like, The Plays is, like, the name of the organization, this Blitzkrieg Battle. So I guess just kind of what have been your thoughts about this announcement and the details, and how do you feel about it? I think there's been like kind of a mixed reaction from the community when I look at like the Reddit and forums. Like some people are like, well, why don't you focus on fixing the game and not focusing on throwing tournaments? But then it's like tournaments help drive attention to the game. So it's like, it's really weird. And then some people said it wasn't a big enough prize pool. Some people said like it wasn't going to encourage enough play. I don't know. Like, I'm just kind of curious because to me, it was like kind of a net positive to get a LAN in early. And especially one that's like kind of low risk at like a smaller event, a smaller scale. It's a great way to test everything out and just get a feel for the game on LAN. So I'm actually like pretty optimistic about it. I didn't need a super huge prize pool off the bat, not this early on, but I don't know how y'all felt about it.
I think the mixed reactions are mostly because of the communication not being all that good by Bulkhead. They were talking like the week before about the big LAN announcement and whatever the hell and stuff like that. People were thinking like this is going to be the first major they're announcing, right? That they're supporting and putting money behind and stuff. But this is basically a local LAN that's putting in 10,000 pounds for a new game, which is really positive. It's really cool. but it's not like one of the majors that Bulkhead are supposed to be supporting. I think the only thing they're supporting in there is like the golden skins, which possibly some random team is gonna get because they are already going to I-Series because it's like a local competition there. So I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do already, because it'll feel like anyone can get those skins. But I think it's great to have just, as I said, local competitions support the game out of their own pockets. Bulkhead is not putting any money in there as far as I know.
Okay.
I guess they just got contacted by them. We're gonna do a tournament for you, for your game, and we're gonna put in £10,000. Great, but then Battalion shouldn't be, Bulkhead shouldn't be communicating as they did, which makes it like which makes people feel like this is gonna be like the first big thing, like the major. Like that's not how it is, but like. People need to be, need to know it's a local thing, and that's great. It's great to have. If it was like the first major that they announced, then it was not so great, because it costs shitloads to get to fucking I-Series. It always has been. It's not even a turn-up-and-play tournament. You gotta take your own computer there. So that's why it's good as a local thing, really good as a local thing. But if it were a major thing, then no.
Well, do you really feel like people expected the major this early? Like, I'm just kind of curious because I don't see how that would have made any sense to do a major right now.
Oh, like
Just, I'll tell you, the day before yesterday, the day before the LAN got announced, I had 3 different NA teams, including us, that were like ready to talk to orgs and figure out how to get funding to go to this first event. And there's still 2 teams that are dead serious about trying to go. It's not as though like it was just a few people and maybe Davy that thought it was going to be a major. I mean, the way it came off was that like maybe there's going to be a qualifier for it. Maybe we have to do well at this Blitzkrieg event, the first one that's happening in NA this weekend. People are shuffling rosters, and I mentioned it right before we started the stream, but Western Kings actually just signed to the org Stay Pure, so they're now pure and we're not anymore. But like that's literally like what NA teams were ready to go out and do, because to my understanding, it was hyped up to be something sick that the first event for the game, and that is disappointing. I think to anybody who's was intent on going for NA. It doesn't necessarily matter to us because we didn't get an event that was necessarily accessible to us. Whatever. I feel for the EU players that were more stoked about it than we were, because there's top teams that probably won't even be able to afford to go. I don't know everything about it, but it seems unfortunate. But I hope it goes well, because still having a local LAN that's being able to showcase the game, have it be streamed, and have it be accessible to people that haven't necessarily experienced the game yet is pretty damn cool. But yeah, I think the thing again that's lacking is just the clarity on what's going to be happening with competition officially with Bulkhead, right? Whether it's through the majors, the events, whether or not they have that paperwork all squared away and they're set to announce, I don't know. It's not my business.
Yeah.
But definitely, I think to an extent there is a bit of a waiting game to see when Bulkhead's going to turn the serious mode on for a time frame for when this game is going to start looking like a real game, as far as like being accessible to everyone and being competitive on a global scale.
So to go back to Davy, because obviously your team is based in Europe, and so it would be a little bit more realistic for your team to go to this event as opposed to some of the NA teams like Lex is talking about. Is this an event that when you saw it, like once you got the full information, that your team would even be interested in? Because you're like one of the top European teams, right? I'm sure that like ideally like people would want you there, but like I don't know what the mindset has been on people outside of the UK on going to an event like this.
If you're gonna be paying out of your own pocket, that's a really hard thing to do. You gotta bring your computer there or rent one there, which is like a lot of money. You gotta get there to Birmingham. It's not London. London is pretty cheap to get to from like Netherlands and Belgium, where we are from, but Birmingham is a different thing. Plus the entry fees are pretty big. If you compare it to the prize pool, and it's a hard decision to make, especially when like we're all working and all that, you know. So it's hard to take days off. Like, I mean, what it is, I know what it is to pay your dues, right? So like back in the day, I went to Stockholm, Sweden, when I was 18 years old, and my Belgian Tech 9 team back then, before we had a European team, we paid out of our own pockets, but Tech 9, because Tech 9 didn't have sponsors yet, we paid out of our own pockets to get to Stockholm from Belgium, to play a one-nighter LAN for like 2,000 euros, entire prize pool, by the way. So the winner got like 1,200 euros or something. That's nothing, but that was because of the love of the game, and we just put in our money and our time, and it was an investment. And eventually, like, we started to do well, and that's how we got sponsors and stuff. But I feel like I've done that. I'm not in a situation anymore where I'm gonna be doing that kind of stuff, and that's why I'm not gonna be going to this I series unless someone wants to sponsor us. And I think a lot of people are gonna be like that.
Okay. Well, like, I figured the Article 51 players would probably go because they're all like around that area, or put some type of team together.
Wasn't it sold out already by the I series? Like, it was announced yesterday, and it's close to sold out or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Could be wrong. I could be wrong on this, so don't you know. But I know there has been said that you got to be fast to get your tickets, and then somebody today or yesterday linked something on Discord about tickets being sold out, but that could be weekend tickets or whatever. I'm not sure, but
right.
I think you got to be real fast on this. And if you want to be attracting an orc in like 2 days or no, right now,
no sir, not happening. And that's like that's the worst part. Is I honestly don't. Maybe I think that's kind of the scary part though. Is that if you have a competitive scene and you're signing to orgs early on just to go to this one event or something like that, and I'm not saying that the NA teams that have either done this or for other reasons have signed to those orgs, I don't know. But I will say is that that's something that we don't want to do. I would love to just have my team be mythic and acquire our own funding. It wouldn't be too hard to do. I mean, it's 2018. If you have social media following or an active Twitch, stuff like that, anything that you can market to a sponsor, it's really not that difficult. And Battalion's a growing game, so like the numbers will be there eventually. But like right now, you have an early access game that's less than a month out. You can't really take any kind of competitive level right now that you might be at and take it credibly to a sponsor and say in 6 months we're going to be a top team still. Like, you don't know that. And on top of that, it's like I don't think teams are necessarily like in a position to bargain with sponsors in any way or organizations. So like, yeah, be a great negotiator, but I just hope that if players are thinking about doing that, just caution them, like, don't sign anything that you don't have a lawyer looked over first. And that's like the first Lex lesson that you'll get as far as dealing with orgs, man. Like especially a new game like this, where as soon as there's leagues announced and as soon as there's tournaments announced and as soon as there's money involved, every single vulture from across the land is going to be coming in and trying to get a piece of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just, I don't want to see players like having their careers ended like it was in CS for a long time, just because, you know, you have an org that doesn't want to pay for things or doesn't want to support you properly. So, I mean, I think unfortunately that's the downside of having this land be local and also somewhat accessible to so many European teams, is that like, if it is expensive to go to, then, you know, even having a bigger prize pool isn't necessarily going to make it viable because you're paying out of your own pocket in most cases. I don't know. It's tough. I hope it's not taken too seriously as far as, you know, esports is concerned, and it's more about testing the game and having it be a good showcase and having some fun with it, because, you know, I want the other events throughout the year that you know, when the game has grown and matured a bit and the organizations that are coming in are kind of more aware of the space and what they're dealing with, can actually consciously and respectfully, I think, to the game, you know, give players a fair shot to go and compete at these events. And eventually when Bulkhead's making millions, you know, it's not going to be an issue anymore, because they'll just have them and ESL just pay for your travel and your hotel, just like it was in CS towards the end. Oh, it was amazing.
Right.
Like, it is weird to me to think that, like, I'm traveling back in time essentially to a community where you don't have any of the support that like, you know, we kind of grew ourselves over the years in CS:GO. But that's an exciting thing too, is that, you know, when money does start rolling into the game from the outside, you know, how's it going to pay off for players, and what's the scene going to look like? Because Overwatch was a wild west for a long time. You know, there was a lot of salaried teams that were just scrimming every day. We're not even playing matches. I don't know. I think it'll be okay eventually, though. I don't know. I kind of got off on a tangent there talking about the land, but
you're good. That's what, I mean, that's the topic. The topic was the land, so you did well. Davey, do you have anything to add to any of that?
I think I said my stuff. What I did notice is I have been talking to orgs. I come from a time where like just like full land support was the only thing you needed, right? Like wages and shit that was not involved.
Right.
And right now, what orgs ask, and even big orgs, I've talked to the big ones as well. Like, one of the first things they ask or want is like, will Bulkhead be paying for all the travel and stuff? I was like, what the fuck? Aren't you doing it with your fucking $1 million investors and shit? What is this, man? I was so surprised about that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, the overhead
you want a return on investment, right? But I think if you want someone to carry your name, then you don't. I mean, I think like just supporting them fully, just getting them to places is like a standard thing, but apparently not anymore.
In Counter-Strike anymore. TOs pay for all travel now. Like, you know,
I can't even think of a game.
Yeah.
I can't even think of a major esport that
team organizations have really
that.
passed that on to TOs to handle instead because they felt like it was eating into them. So that's like that's how the business has shifted in esports.
I mean, think about it. Like an org's overhead, if you're paying a monthly wage to players in general, is like already astronomical as far as like you said, the return on investment for just having a team, especially in a growing game in early access. Like how much are we going to have to actually pay for you guys to compete in this game becomes like, okay, well, you better have something to offer me. And that comes in the form of like, you know, are you going to win everything? Are you going to stream? Are you going to be able to make content? Are you going to do all these things? And older players that have been out of the scene for a while don't have that foothold. Like, I am blessed that I just played 6 years of CS:GO or whatever it is. Like, you know, by just being there, I grew. And unfortunately, it means that, like, we're going to be jumping into an era where I think in a lot of respect, organizations, sponsors, and tournament organizers that are looking at Bulkhead for like, hey, we want to host your game. Like, what's it going to take? It's going to fall on the negotiating skills of Bulkhead and, you know, the patience of the tournament organizers to understand that, you know, we don't have that kind of infrastructure support here. We don't have the financial support to like have every team be catered every event be catered and have like, you know, player lounges and whatever else, unless it's an ESL or sponsored event, something like that, where they have the bankroll to do it. And that's something that I don't think is clear to the entire space yet regarding Battalion, because there's not a developed scene. There's not already money flowing through the game. It's going to be really tough to find an org that can justify paying a salary and paying travel for a game that's not going to have a lot of exposure right now.
Yeah, I guess some orgs could see it as an investment just to have a potentially good team early on, make sure they have the resources to already put in the time, so that they have an advantage when the game does pop off. You know, like that's just, you know, managing your assets. Like that's what $1 million investors do, right? They put in money there, and there, hoping one of them pops off. And that's what I guess some people could see a Battalion team as well, but I assume most don't.
Yeah, I think it's a scary thing because if you're an organization now, you pick up a team, unless you sign them to a long-term contract agreement, you're probably not, like if you sign them right now, you're probably not even going to get a lot of tournaments out of them because I don't know what other lands might be planned for 2018. I'm not sure what online league stuff is. I think it's just too much of a question mark. It feels to me like 2018 is more of like an early access year. Maybe we do a few lands to give it some attention. We do a couple of online tournaments, but like it feels like the real meat of the esports side of Battalion probably wouldn't come until 2019. So if you sign a team now, you only sign to like a 1-year contract, and they become really good in the early tournaments, they just go to a bigger org next year when like the real tournaments show up. So I think that's also probably like kind of a factor that factors into org signing Battalion teams right now, is that, well, what are we even really going to get out of this? Like maybe you get some initial exposure because you're one of the first orgs to jump into this game, and like what Penta did basically in Europe. Like, you know, they're one of the first ones on board. They're also one of the first ones on board in Rainbow Six. Our team just won that Rainbow Six Invitational thing. So maybe it's like you make like an early play to be there first and be like a trailblazer, and maybe you get some exposure because you're one of the first there from like different like news outlets or whatever the case may be. But yeah, like unless you're like picking up a team that has like some popular streamers or something, or like people with big social media followings, like it's really difficult, I feel like, to sign a Battalion team right now for probably a lot of different people.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's really what
you do have. Bamberton on record telling you, Dust, that there's gonna be a 6-figure prize pool distributed. It's not specified if it's one tournament or whatever, but apparently, I talked to other people that are involved with devs. Apparently, that's the entire prize pool for this year, which is still good, I guess. So like, it's you have it on a record 6-figure tournaments, like over 6.
I got on record 5-figure prize pool tournaments.
I mean, is that even relevant though? And I ask that because when you're talking about prize pools, the orgs, I mean, some orgs might ask for a cut of your prize pool, but I can't even remember the last time I had an org that touched any of my winnings. So they're not necessarily going to get a return on any kind of like prize pool. So even if you'd had $1 million tournament, what you invest would be in the hopes that your team wins, yes, and gets a lot of exposure from it. But if there's not people tuning into the events, then what's the point, right? So
it's about
while I do agree that like a prize pool does play into that, if there's not people watching the game and paying attention to what your team's doing, then there's zero return effectively.
Yeah, but the prize pool is what brings the viewers, right? Like, or it seemed like
does it though?
I mean, I think so.
Sometimes.
I mean, our viewership has dropped off for online tournaments, for tournaments that have no prize pool at all. I'm curious what will happen behind a tournament that actually does have a cash prize pool, if that would attract viewership.
Yes, I agree with that.
I don't know how much it scales up. But, I mean, think about it, even in CSGO, you get $1 million major, you get way more viewers on it than, like, some $100,000 DreamHack Open event. But that also does depend on what teams are competing, I think drives that a lot. Like, if you have the elite teams there, people are going to watch it. But even still, like, we have a bunch of elite teams playing at Star Series right now in CSGO. Yeah, they're going to get some 6-figure viewer counts, but, like, if you want the million plus, that's whenever you get that big $1 million major. That's when those big numbers come in that have huge eyeballs on the game. So it does factor into to a pretty substantial degree, I think. But
I mean,
I don't know what it would
it's everything. It's everything, and this is something that I think the devs are aware of, but people in the community either get or they don't get. And it's like Twitch changed everything in esports, and unfortunately, that was like right after CoD 4 was when everything started changing. So a lot of people aren't aware of what's important now if you're going to be a pro player or you're going to be a pro team, and the analytics of it are just that numbers matter. And so if the game doesn't pull viewers and it doesn't have viewership, then you're not going to make money playing it. That's the bottom line. Unfortunately, that means until the game does get viewership and until there is money in tournaments, until there is competition, like your chances of having like really good teams and super teams and people actually advancing the game at a rapid pace because they're being paid to do it, that's like you said, that's probably like 2019 territory. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah, that's true. So we talked about a lot, but before we sign off, I was just curious, is there anything else on like your wish list for this game that we haven't talked about yet? I mean, we already talked about some balancing stuff, some map stuff. We've obviously talked about like spec UI needs work. So we've already kind of dabbled in some things we think need work and some things that we already think are really good. But I'm just curious, like I hear at the end if there's anything else on your wish list we haven't addressed yet.
I think we messaged the devs probably like 2 weeks ago because we found an issue, and I haven't posted anything about this or tweeted about it, and I don't even know if anybody else is aware of it. I've told some other NA teams, but something that was interesting to me that we found was movement speed between weapons, and I kind of want to hear your thoughts on it, Davey, because we went into a server one day and tested out all the movement speed between weapons because on the early access launch there was an update that basically explicitly stated that SMGs were going to be the fastest movement speed in the game. Pistols were going to be right behind them, followed by shotguns, and then everything else. And that doesn't happen. So in the game right now, basically, if you were to run from point A to point B on any point of the map, the difference between the speeds would be absolutely negligible. Sprinting, walking, doesn't matter. Movement speed for everything is essentially the same right now. And so we went back and forth with the devs for days on end, trying to get it tested. We recorded videos. We sent them all the proof we needed. And they ended up going in and testing it and finding that, like, I don't even know what percentage it is. I think it's less than 10% of the difference between all the guns. And it actually kind of makes me wonder how the game would play differently if those values were actually noticeable. So if you were to like run to a sniper point right now with your pistol out, you would reach it at the same point if you had a heavy. And so I guess my question is to Davey, which is like, how do you feel about weapon speed and how it would change the game? Because I've like thought about it a lot, and I'm still not entirely sure whether or not they should like drastically change it so it is noticeable. And my follow-up question to that, and I don't care which one you address first, would be, so like right now, I think people are starting to get into the habit of like crouch jumping or strafe jumping at the end of your stamina to get places faster and using it as like a movement tool to get or like beat people places. Basically, you wait till the end of your sprint and then you crouch or strafe jump and basically you start your sprint again. What are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, my team has our own opinions and we disagree on it all the time, and it's hard to get an outside perspective, but here I am. So,
first of all, like, I haven't tested the movement speeds like on servers or whatever, but I think there is a noticeable difference when you're, let's say, if you're in a excuse me, in a 2v2 situation, right? And me as a default, yay, I'm left with my teammate Toxia, for example, who is an SMG player, and you want to have like you want to be able to refrag, right? If your teammate gets killed, you can be near him to refrag that Presley. How is that term called in English?
Trade
frag. Yeah. Uh-huh. I feel there is a noticeable difference. Like I'm having a hard time keeping up with him as an SMG. Well, him as an SMG and me as a default when ADSing, you know, like I gotta be like,
ADS speed definitely is different.
I'm not talking about ADS speed.
You're talking about just Spitfire running.
I'm just talking about, like, should you run faster with a pistol out versus your scope or your heavy or whatever it is?
That makes
like in CoD 2, you would speed around if you had a pistol out and you would move slower with weapons.
You didn't have
because
right? But,
when you talk about jump meta and peeker's advantage, like the SMG, if it worked as intended, would be even faster than it is now, and everything else would be slower. So like my current thought is like with the way the game's played right now is that if they were to mess with the movement speed as I think they intended it to be, where like, you know, if you pull your pistol out, you can reach a place faster and then draw your weapon. Like if it were like that, I think SMGs would probably be even more strong than they are now, since you don't have to run with a pistol out. I don't know. It was just a thought, because we were talking about peeker's advantage and jumping accuracy and stuff like that earlier. if they just like slowed some of the movement speeds down and brought the SMG on par with regular weapons, I feel like the game would be a little bit more risky if you were taking those fast plays, you know, with an SMG out or whatever. You weren't moving quite as quickly. And some of the complaints might even be resolved with just, you know, the jumping.
For me, ideally, but I know it's not a popular opinion, I just want sprint gone. Gone.
Yeah?
Just have pistol be the fastest movement, and make sure you get out your main gun when you think you're gonna go into battle. But well, actually, that's just the main thing for me. Else, I didn't really notice big difference. Well, no, actually, the ADS thing, of course, but else, I don't know. I didn't take the time to go into server either as well to check that out, so I couldn't really.
Okay. Never mind. Then I honestly, it was like a burning question for me because I don't think most people know that. I still run with my pistol out even though it makes no difference. It's just, I don't know. I feel like the movement speeds for all players and weapons like isn't where it should be yet.
Right.
I don't know how they can fix it.
I definitely think you should run fast with like your pistol out or something. I think it's like equivalent to running with your knife out in Counter-Strike. But I think like once you have your main gun in your hands, it should be like relatively similar values across the board. At least that's how I feel about it. Also, to tap off of Davy, I feel like you need sprint in this game because if you don't, put it this way, like, and I know this is going to sound shitty and obviously it's going to sound overgeneralized, but I feel like movement in this game is one of the things that sets it apart from like some of its other shooter companions. And I feel like if you took sprint out of Battalion, well, don't we just have Counter-Strike with ADS at that point?
I get that point, but I just like that kind of game.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, it's fine, like admitting personal bias and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know.
But like right now, SMGs are faster than pistol, right? Isn't it like that?
Technically, I mean, it's literally a fraction of a fraction of a fraction faster. Like very few milliseconds difference. It's it's testably. I mean, unfortunately, I think the response that I got from Brammer was that you know, it wasn't a bug, so we ruled that out. We thought it was like a serious bug issue because the patch note said it was going to be in there, but it is just minor, and I think they're rethinking how they because of that. I think they're rethinking how they think about movement and what they want it to look like because they weren't even aware that it was that insignificant. And I don't know. I think they're going to eventually work on it, but I don't know if it needs to. I don't know. Seeing what you thought about it. I love sprint. Never going away.
No, it's not going away. I understand that. I'm just gonna keep
I'm just
talking
kidding.
about it.
Yeah.
Like I did with the one taps, and eventually it came. So, but anyway, I think pistols should be faster than your main gun, even SMG, because it motivates. It won't motivate you. Like it's normal now in SMG to sprint because it's faster, and that's how you will be ready around the corner with an SMG already, right? Instead of being forced to switch from the pistol to the SMG. If you know what I mean, like the situation I'm trying to describe.
Yeah, if you're going for an aggressive play, you're taking a risk, and like you're going to kill a guy at a spot, like you're going to need speed to get there and have an element of surprise. Where like if you're switching weapons mid animation, not only is that painful to watch if you're a spectator, like somebody getting caught with their pistol out, just like it is in CS, getting caught with your knife out, but like it's frustrating from a player's perspective. But sprint kind of also has the same thing. Like when you're sprinting into a bomb site, you can't sprint into a bomb site because you can't shoot while you're sprinting. And that's, I think, is like a positive about the way guns behave in Call of Duty 4, I guess, and then into this game, where like you do get punished if you sprint, but I don't know if you should get punished for sprinting and having to have your pistol out at the same time. But I don't know. Interesting.
Any more wish list items to address before we sign out this first episode?
I actually asked this to my teammates earlier, and I checked this huge list they sent to me. But a lot of it is already stuff we discussed, like time to kill and smokes and leaning. And oh yeah, but I think they will do that. I'd like team killing to be added at some point.
Yeah.
I think we've had it on our server. I think it just causes the server to crash during the closed beta or like right after early access launch. I don't know if that's still a thing. Like even Dizzy's server does like has friendly fire on it. We've played some games with that.
Oh,
yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I think it was buggy, so they have it off by default for
yeah, that's something that like in my head it's like I'm not even complaining about it because I'm sure they're gonna be putting it in at some point. It's just something
right
normal.
I think if I was to add something for a wish list, I mean, you just touched on it. We didn't really talk about it too much earlier. Is just I think players have already adapted to it to a point, at least at a higher level. But leaning is very confusing for anybody who's just coming to this game because you're punished for leaning and slow peeking things always. Mm-hmm. And it's better to if you're going to slow peek something to just not lean at all, one. But then two, like even if you're jiggle peeking with a lean, you're still exposing so much of your body. Like, is the vision worth it? I don't know. I think sniper battles would be way less jumpy and you'd have less less of these angle fights that just turn into, I mean, I love it. I had some crazy rounds. I think it was even yesterday while you were around, Dust, where I literally just would bunny hop around the entire time, like in scope battles. And it's just, like you get punished by that. I think it's a blast to fight against. But I will say, like, I can't get punished for doing that by somebody holding an angle a lot of the time because
it's like, more worth it if you pull that off than it's punishable.
Yeah.
You know?
That's kind of what I was getting at is like I think a lot of the common complaints from players that maybe have a more difficult time adapting rather than just being bad, like just actually having a difficult time understanding that dynamic. It's not obvious if you just hop into a game that leaning exposes so much of your body. I know it was intended, and I don't think it's bad. It's just it makes it frustrating because even me as a CoD 2 player, you know, thinking back to my scope days of old was just, you know, you would lean peek everything. You would slow peek everything because that's what leaning was for. And it's different in this game. And
yeah, I do know that a leaning buff is supposed to be on the way. That was one of the other things that Brammer...
Have they said that?
Yeah. Like along with the SMG nerf, a lean buff was definitely something else that they've been talking about doing. Because right now, I don't even really use lean ever. Like when I play,
that scares me.
Gets me killed the entire time.
Yeah,
like I've never been in a situation where I felt like leaning was going to be better than jiggle peeking. And maybe that's just because I'm a CS guy, and so like it's ingrained in me to jiggle peek, and like leaning is something I've never really used. I've never really played a game long term that had lean as a feature. So I think that's just me.
I see.
But I've never really felt handicapped by not leaning, I guess. But of course, I only play like real casual stuff, so I'm not in this fight.
Leaning is still useful.
So weird that their fix for the lean was that if you're the guy leaning, you don't see as much as the guy you're leaning towards too. That's just so weird, so like unbalanced. It's just not normal. I mean, it's fucked up.
Just kills lean.
Weirdest fix ever for something to make something unbalanced.
Well, you remember in CoD 2, like I think it was the left lean. They did that essentially just to counter the left lean bug. That was like one of the 3 updates you ever had in like CoD 2 was when you would lean left, the player model would like stick his leg out an extra half foot, so you were at least exposed if you were glitching it. There are ways around, I think, abusing lean and peeker's advantage because that's ultimately what they were trying to avoid, right? Is the left lean, right lean VLL stuff that plagued CoD 1. I mean, they're always
Quake engine thing.
I mean, it's a Quake engine thing to a point, but think about how movement works in this game. I mean, your player model will trail behind you, and yeah, you can die behind walls, but you know, with Peeker's advantage, it was really tough to punish. I don't even know if they had it all the way through alpha with the leaning like it is right now, but I feel like you can still VLL in this game pretty well. You can't do it with prone, but like you get a headshot box, you can hitbox abuse all day. And I worry that would be the same thing with leaning. So maybe if they minimize Peeker's advantage, they can go back and readdress the lean thing better than they are right now, even. Because I see their point if that's the case, but I'm, again, not one of the devs, so I don't know.
So there you go. So any other final thoughts, guys? Any other wish list items, or do you think we've kind of tackled the bulk of it? Remember, we do have more episodes in the future, so we don't have to nail everything here, but I just wanted
we had
to
a lot to cover for this one, so
yeah, we covered a lot with first impressions, alpha, beta, early access, competitive launch, first lance, first tournament. So yeah, we definitely covered a lot here. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is where you can go super sellout, so I'll let you guys do your final shout outs before we close the episode.
Oh yeah, for the org that's sponsoring me, oh wait, no, there's no. No, I'm just happy that you have like the Twitter thing here.
There you go. Go follow Davy's Twitter.
Right?
See, that's the shout out you got to do. Just go follow Davy on Twitter. There you go. Boom.
No, and like thanks to you, Dustin and Vince for covering the game, and it's important to have people like you doing this. So
yeah, man.
Yeah, we're gonna keep grinding. And Lex, what about you, man? Any shout outs, words, final thoughts?
Mine'll be a little bit longer.
Go ahead.
I don't know how many people are gonna watch this, but in NA, it's. I feel like we're in a little bit of a different stance than EU is. I mean, not only do we not have at least a potential local land to look forward to, we don't have any kind of like real competition promised in the near future that's been announced yet. So I just would encourage any young players or new players to the scene that are coming in. If you haven't checked out the TZ, and I have no affiliation with these guys whatsoever, but they're actually doing phenomenal things for NA, and it's essentially like ESEA, Pug Finder, Rank S, Rank G, community ran right now.
Right.
The Discord's public access. You can go into my Twitch link, or even on my Twitter, and find a command on there on my
Lex,
Twitch. I think it's !CZ.
Real quick, I can tell you that some NA orgs are interested in running some cash NA tournaments, Sivo being one of them.
I was about to get to that.
Okay.
I have heard about leagues privately. I didn't know that this was public info, so I'll let you take that away in a minute. But I have been contacted by pretty much every small to mid-sized event organizer in North America, at least 3 of the 4 big ones that I can think of, trying to get in contact with Bulkhead for trying to do esports stuff. And this is like within the past few days, so these guys aren't scared of the player counts because they know what's on the horizon, and it really is just up to us to start playing the game and make it better as far as the early access is concerned. And you're only going to get out of it at this point what you're going to put into it. So if you're waiting on the sidelines, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to keep waiting a little bit longer. But now's the time to get in the game and start learning it if you're new. And I want people to understand that, like, until we start competing and making teams and growing the player counts ourselves and having fun with the game, like, this is your last chance, Call of Duty scene, to really have a fucking awesome opportunity at being relevant in a modern era. We never were our entire lives, and now you have a chance. And it's just like, I want people to experience what I've been blessed with experiencing in CS over the past several years, because so many great gamers came before me. I'm on one with a podcast right now, and those guys kind of got lost in the annals of esports history. Gotfrag doesn't exist anymore, so your careers don't either. But I'm telling you, like, ultimately, this is like everyone's chance that had that kind of like dream of coming out and playing a game and being pro at it and having it be Call of Duty is now Battalion. And the game might not look very pretty right now, but I'm going to do everything I can, and I know a lot of the NA streamers that have been holding off from playing are going to do everything they can to make sure that we get a fair look for the people that are going to be coming after us once the game gets popular, because they'll be coming. But that's it. That's all I got.
All right, yeah, again, thanks for everyone for tuning in. Again, we appreciate your feedback as well. This is our first episode doing this, and so obviously we're still trying to figure out what we want the show to be, and, definitely just let us know what you thought about the show in the comments below or what have you, or whatever social media that this gets posted to. Be sure to drop a comment and let us know what you thought about it. Other than that, just give a follow to everyone on Twitter that participated, because they did give up their time. So definitely follow the LeX and Davy, SYS. You also follow me on Twitter, and hopefully you'll see a lot more from us in the future and a lot more from Battalion in the future. But without further ado, we're signing out. Until next time.